The Environmental Protection Committee meeting, September 16th, Committee Board 1. I'm Alice Blank, Chair of the committee, and I'm joined here with Tammy Meltzer, Chair of the Board, who's also doing the text for tonight. So thanks very much for all showing up. It was primarily online. We have a few folks in the room and we may be getting a few more, but we are interested in getting started pretty soon. So we're just looking to make sure we have some semblance of a quorum, which is coming in as we speak.
On field trip. To see the,
Oh, I did to Chinatown. Oh, thank you very much for having seen that. I think that's helpful, right?
Yes,
You
it
get
is.
a real sense of what we're talking about. Okay. So. Moved everyone over, great. So we're gonna start off, as is noted on our agenda, with the New York Climate Exchange update. It's very exciting. Neil Padicone, Director of the Green Economic Transformation, that's correct, for the Climate Exchange. So as many of you may or may not know, and we just pulled up a picture of it, the Climate Exchanges will be located on Governor's Island. It's something we've all been waiting for and talking about now for a number of years. And seems like a great opportunity to learn a little bit about what's going on there. There's some changing in your, I guess, leadership and things. I don't know what you're talking about, but whatever it is. So take it away, Neil, and welcome and thank you.
Right, feel free to come over and sit at the table and join us.
sure, thank you.
Yeah, you're talking into the owls.
Talking-
Right.
Thank you so much. And just off the bat, thank you for the beautiful pronunciation of my last name.
Oh.
That is not usually what I get. I usually get I don't know.
Beautiful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, good.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to share some of what we are up to at the New York Climate Exchange. As Helen mentioned, my name is Neil Padicone. I recently joined the exchange about a month and a half, I think we're coming up on 2 months ago. I used to work in the mayor's office of talent and workforce development on industrial strategy for the city. And so it's a nice kind of transition for me. My boss, Steve Hammer, sends his deep regrets that he couldn't join you today. He's really excited to share more and more adroitly than I can what the vision is and what we're working on. I think he's hoping to join you in the next couple of months to share to the full board. But I thought I'd give you a little bit of a heads up about what particularly with a focus on what we're working on ahead of Climate Week, which is next week. But just in case, if you could go to the next slide, please. Helen, you shared a little bit about the background of the Climate Exchange, but just for those who might not be fully aware, after a couple of years of a RFP, issued by the city, Mayor Adams and the trust selected Snowden Brook University as the anchor institution for a Center for Climate Solutions, and the winning bid there, as the winning bid, which gave way to the New York Climate Exchange. And we have a goal to put Governor's Island and New York City itself sort of at the center of efforts to solve climate change, kind of capitalizing on the fact that New York is itself at the crux of so many challenges and opportunities, really. In my last role, I worked on the city's green economy action plan. So I'm personally using that as something of a starting point for engaging some of these conversations. But I think the really exciting thing about the exchange itself is that it uses Governor's Island and New York as a test bed and a demonstration place for what is possible, both in actual practice in terms of what the potential solutions are and in how the solutions are generated. And so the way that we operate, next slide, please, is this kind of intersection between collaboration and co-location. Co-location, of course, using this physical space at Governor's Island, as anyone who's been there kind of sees it, that the island itself is at the mouth of the harbor. And from there, you can kind of see a little bit of everything that New York faces from a climate perspective. The coastline, the the port right there, the harbor, the edge of Manhattan, the skyscrapers, all of that, and sort of that embodiment of the urban challenges are really what we hope can kind of inspire solutions there. Go to the next slide, please. The, sorry, just one more.
That's the course of it.
Press ahead one more. It should be, I don't know if they all, oh, weird. Strangely, these did not load. Anyway, back one.
Want me to go back one,
Please.
see?
Yeah. So, back two, I guess. You go for it.
Yeah, I'm going forward, okay, hold on a sec, I'll just go back, and then be right back with me. So after the new approach, you had Collaboration Works and
The list of partners there.
there you go.
So yeah, the way that the exchange is organized is that we are a collaborative of core partners, including 12 universities, 3 corporations, and a few dozen community partners that span the economic development, environmental justice, and community development and engagement worlds. And the idea here is to sort of take, and it's both kind of a microcosm of what's happening in New York City, but also further afield. So we're learning from solutions elsewhere, trying to sort of pilot them here, scale them here, and then in the process of developing those solutions locally, we're able to scale those even further because we have this kind of regional, national, and global network of organizations and entities that are part of these solutions. Next, please.
Is that right?
Yeah, perfect. So as Helen mentioned, really the anchor physical space is the Exchange campus, which will be located on Governor's Island. We'll be sharing a little bit more about this in the coming weeks. I think when Steve comes to join you all, he'll be able to share a little more detail. But in a nutshell, the campus that we're looking for will be simultaneously a space for convening and for applied research in key areas that are of interest to climate change solutions. And the campus itself is looking to kind of model some of the potential solutions by embodying them in how the physical space is developed and run. I'll leave it at that. Like I said, I want Steve to share some of the detail on that. Moving to the next slide, please. And so our value-add approach, Steve himself is only about 8 or 9 months on the job. The rest of us are less than that. Like I said, I'm 2 months in. My colleagues who recently came from New Lab at Brooklyn Navy Yard, my colleague Shana Horowitz, who came from Brooklyn Navy Yard's New Lab, and Adel Costo, who was at Carb Strategies before. We are sort of the programming leadership team. And we are trying to kind of jump straight into the work here. We had a summer internship program that matched interns from our academic network with local community organizations. We hosted a handful of ideas labs, which were kind of deep, highly focused conversations on issues related to climate and health, oceans. And one of the things that I'm working on is a secondary market for electric vehicle batteries. Rather than just have folks dump their batteries on the streets or wherever they may be, come up with an actual circular supply chain for them after their first use. Maybe they can go into battery storage, into building energy storage before they're used for secondary materials. Next. And of course, sorry, the Wall Street Forum is probably an interesting piece for young professionals. It's probably an interesting piece for Community Board One, given that Wall Street is right here. This is a way for young professionals on Wall Street and in the financial sector to get more awareness and working within the climate movement so that they are able to deploy their skills, not just on kind of what supports purely the bottom line, but supports that triple. A few of the ideas labs that we hosted this fall and that we will continue to expand upon lie in the K through 12 education and climate literacy space. We're trying to build out and strengthen connections with the Department of Education so that all of the work that comes out of our academic network can inform a lot of the work that's happening here on throughout the city schools. Coastal resiliency and stormwater, we're in close conversation with the Department of Environmental Protection to make sure that any gaps in possibly their service or what they're capable of delivering on a kind of micro level, maybe we can play a role in filling some of those in terms of homeowner awareness, in terms of building awareness about what potential opportunities and resources are to try out new resiliency solutions. AI and climate, and the other piece is kind of workforce development, which falls in my portfolio as well. Looking at ways that we can empower our local workforce and the emerging workforce to actually do some of these things that are needed on the resiliency and decarbonization front. So as I mentioned, Climate Week, as you're probably all aware, is coming up fast, and New York City will become a really big hub of really exciting activities. And so right here, we've got a QR code that will lead you directly to this list and with a lot more detail. We've got upwards of 30 events that we ourselves are organizing or partnering with our partner organizations on. We've got the ones in blue up there are the ones that are on Governor's Island itself. And there are at least one or two more that fall within those that are not on Governor's Island there are at least one or two more that fall specifically within Community Board 1, and we welcome you and all your members to join us for any and all of those. This is a really broad mix of events dealing with issues from climate finance to resiliency technology to climate technology to the startup acceleration of the startups to education and community research. But I want to take a moment to highlight just a few events that are in this neck of the woods that might be of particular interest to this committee. If you could go to the next slide, please. The first is Climate Week NYU kickoff. This is going to be we'll have speakers representing, the NYU students, faculty, and staff, as well as different organizations to really share ways to get involved. That'll be on the island on the 22nd in partnership with Pratt Center, the Pratt Institute, and their Center for Climate Adaptation. They are having another round of exhibitions, actually, which will also be of interest to folks that are interested in the development of our campus, because they have a specific exhibit about some of the resiliency technologies that we're exploring and will possibly be deploying on our campus in its development. The Wednesday, the 25th, we have a full day event, full day of programming right on the island. This is the New York Climate Exchange's Climate Tech Showcase. We've got a few dozen technology startups and companies from across our partner network, as well as panel discussions with leaders from across the city and across the country and across our partner network. That'll be discussing just a kind of a sampling of the type of work that we'll be undertaking. Also on island at Pratt Institute Center for Climate Adaptation is this next piece on island adaptations. That'll have a panel discussion, including the exchange, the trust, Pratt Institute, and others. Also will hopefully be of interest to folks in this committee. Next slide. Yeah, please.
Sorry, just interrupting for one.
Not at all.
This will live home public, which is really lovely, but we'd be really happy to send out the notices for all public ones.
Yeah.
You have some media in the room, so hopefully you can share with them as well to get more public engagement would be great.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Thanks very much.
More events?
More events, and again, these are just highlights. Like I said, this is just 8 of the 30 that we have across the island and across the city. But I just wanted to flag these for this group because 1, they're in your backyard, and 2, they are focused on resiliency and adaptation. One other one that is actually right across the street here at Pace University is specifically on evaluating both the climate risks and opportunities, both from the financial sector perspective and financing natural resiliency infrastructure. And then, of course, a couple there. So, all of these events and more are at that QR code or just nyclimateexchange.org. All of the calendar and signups are there, but would definitely appreciate your.
Well, you're just saying that it has to sign up or register. Can we also get onto the Governor's Island website, or no, it's only through the Climate Exchange?
I believe it's just the climate exchange because some of these events are not on island,
Right.
but we are partnering with them on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So just, in conclusion, the climate exchange is still sort of in our early days, but we're really excited to work with all of you and with all of our partners across New York and beyond to make Governor's Island, to make this neighborhood, to make the city really an example, a microcosm of what can happen for climate solutions citywide, statewide, regionally, nationally. So really appreciative of all your support for getting us to this point, and to your partnership next week for Climate Week and for the beyond. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much for kicking off Climate Week so well. That's a really nice kickoff. Wow, 30 events, and that's just you guys. You're reminding us that we need to get out a lot of information quickly. Are there questions by the group here in the room or online for Neil? And thank you very much. And Ben here, have any questions?
I'm wondering about the construction of the facility itself. Do you have a timeline for that, or what's the status of
For
it?
sure. I'm gonna wait till Steve comes to present with you, just because we're still in some negotiations on some current pieces of that. But 28, 29 is the kind of.
Mhm.
Have you connected at all with the Downtown Alliance, who may be able to share it with their constituency, which is very local?
That's a
only
great
part of
point.
Lower Manhattan, but also New York Law School,
Mhm.
which has a nice outreach, a
Hmm.
little further afield up in Tribeca, but they just did a recent reporting on some resiliency and climate work. So those would all be very good partners
Yeah,
along that line. And the largest resiliency projects that we have in the neighborhood are sponsored and run by the BPCA. So that would be a good partner for the large robust mailing list as well. For them to be able to do some type of social media or anything else to help you along the way.
thank you.
Hudson River Park.
That's really hard, since I don't think any of it applies there, but certainly, well, we welcome you to, we can connect you with Robert Atterbury from the Hudson River Park Trust and see if you can have a connection with them.
I assume you connected with the obvious people like Rebuild and Waterfront Alliance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Many of them are
Are part of your,
partners.
Pratt, right, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody?
Just one more question. Where are you operating out of now?
Yeah, for sure. We have a temporary office on Governor's Island itself. And then one of our partner organizations, Moody's, has generously lent us some of their flight space down here. Yeah. So we're neighbors.
We did get a question, do you have the RSVP specifically for the events, ones that are public?
Yes, it is preferred just to manage flow and all that. Yeah.
Okay, so if you send us flyers with that note,
Mhm.
we will ensure that we can get that information out for you.
Great.
So it looks like Laura. So, hey, Laura, do you have a question or? No questions, no hands up. Okay.
There was one in the chat that was asked.
Okay, yeah, just to remind everybody that chat is not a way to ask questions. You do want to get online and raise your hand and we will call on you, because of course not everyone can see chat here, so that's gonna be your prerequisite for question and answer. But thank you for answering that one anyway. Okay, anybody else? Well, very much, and just remind me, you're coming next to CUNY Board 1 for this full presentation with your CEO, in December, is that when it is?
And I think I don't know if it's been fully scheduled, but I think we're targeting October, November.
October, November, well, let us know the date, because we'll then let the
Of course.
full board know and get that out there early, 'cause I know that'll be another wonderful opportunity. Okay, well, Neil, thank you, it's lovely to meet you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much. Nice
Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All right, so next up, we have the presentation on the proposed locations for the 5G Link New York City structures from City Bridge by Brett Sikoff, the Executive Director of the Franchise Administration and Broadband, New York City Office of Technology and Innovation, that's OTI, and Robert Succato, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, President of City Bridge Wireless. So this may end up as a resolution. We're going to be looking at 7 sites. There were 8. I'm sure that Robert will tell us all about it. Robert has been at the essence of patience. I have sat in on many of these meetings with other boards and the Public Design Commissions. And I will say, I don't always agree with everything you say, but my God, do you entertain a lot of questions and very thoughtfully. So I appreciate that, and I'm sure you'll be back here tonight. And that will then be followed by a representative who will be speaking about some of the environmental issues and interests that I know you all have given this committee. So I think it's up to you, Robert and Brett. But we have your presentation pulled up, and I'm going to ask you, you have to picture that unlike just very few of us who actually know what you're talking about, you really want to make clear, and I've seen this many times, what you are talking about, that these are the poles, not the existing stainless steel structures that are now being phased out into this new pole structure. And that's really what these 7 sites are, and which ones are in a commercial zone versus a residential and all that good stuff. And please, everybody, feel free. This will be the only presentation, if I'm not mistaken, on these 7 sites. Is that correct? So,
Certainly, if you'd like to come back, I'm happy to talk about it, but yes, this is all we're scheduled.
okay, so this is your moment to really drill down. We will have one other moment to look at these sites in terms of landmarking issues, which is really where we can opine and be heard to the State Historic Preservation Office. That will happen at the Landmarks Preservation Committee meeting on September 23rd, when we'll look at each one of the sites with a little bit more depth in terms of preservation questions that may come up, because these are in some cases quite near, adjacent, or not within historic districts, but adjacent to. So that's it so far. So
Yeah,
thank you very much.
quick introduction to me before Rob gets into the presentation. So again, Brett Seikoff, I'm the Executive Director of Franchise Administration and Broadband with the New York City Office of Tech and Innovation. I oversee all of the city's telecommunications franchises, so all the companies that want to do business with the city, to utilize city rights of way or physical infrastructure like street furniture, cable companies, mobile telecommunications companies, information or fiber franchises, and of course, the public communications structures franchise that Rob is representing today. Link 5G and the Link NYC program in general is really part of the larger ecosystem of all of the broadband option solutions that the city has embraced over these many years. So it gets access to free public Wi-Fi, many public amenities, phone calling, and access to 311, 911, provides a space for advertising, through which local community groups or local businesses can utilize for free advertising. City gets revenue from that advertising to pay for other business, the general fund, pay for other projects. That's in addition to Big Apple Connect, which is another part of another initiative by this administration, provides free internet to residents of New York City Housing Authority, parts of the city. Other solutions that are currently in the works to initiatives and solutions to get more broadband out. But I'll turn it over to Rob to talk more about the program itself and the specific locations that we're going to speak to today.
Sure. Thank you, Brad, and thanks to everybody of all the members of the subcommittee here at Manhattan Community Board 1. We're very happy to be here today to talk about the kiosk program and the proposed Link 5G sites that we've been talking about for Manhattan Community Board 1. Do you want to put the presentation up, or how do we want to do this? I can just talk. on two. I don't know if people at home would be able to see it or.
Yeah.
But what you see up here is exactly what they see online.
Got it. Okay, so let's jump to the second slide then. So what is the purpose of Link NYC? We believe the purpose is to provide free and equitable access to connectivity, information, and wireless services. Many of you are probably very familiar with the Link NYC kiosks that do exist. There are approximately 2,100 deployed throughout the city at this point in time. Most of them are the 9.5-foot kiosks that you no doubt have seen, which have 2-pound advertising on both sides. Go to the next slide, Pat. So there's a picture of it here. This one, I guess, is up on Broadway and 72nd. How does the Link NYC provide this free and equitable access? Well, first thing is we provide high-speed free public Wi-Fi throughout New York City. So each of our kiosks is outfitted with a gigabit of Wi-Fi service. That's probably, in fact, I'm very confident that the Wi-Fi service provided for many of the kiosks is probably better than what anybody has at home, certainly better than what I have at home. And it's provided free of charge to anyone who wants to use it. We provide free nationwide digital calling. That is, there's a dial pad on the kiosk, enabling people to make free domestic phone calls. We've got a 911 button. We have a tablet, which provides access to certain social services. We've outfitted the kiosk so that it has video relay service for the deaf and hard of hearing. While we use the two-sided screens on the kiosks for generate revenue to support the program, so there's paid advertising on there, we also provide a significant amount of free advertising to nonprofits, local businesses, as well as provide a portion of the advertising space to the city, public service announcements. And those were widely used during the pandemic. Provide information about COVID and other health aspects of the pandemic. We also have a USB port for free charging of mobile devices that is available on all the kiosks. The next slide. So this slide talks about the digital divide in New York, and that while New York is a very, very connected city, you would be surprised by the large numbers of people who either don't have home internet, don't have mobile internet, or don't have either one. The combination of those three groups is 3.4 million people, which is larger than the population of most cities in the United States. We don't for it to say that the kiosk services is the same as having a home internet access. It's not, nor is it the same as having a prepaid cellular phone plan from Verizon. It's not, but it does at the same time provide a access to the internet to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people each week here in New York City. During the pandemic, we did a survey of our users, and approximately 30% of them indicated that access to the Link NYC kiosk free Wi-Fi was their only access to the internet. So while we don't know exactly who our users are due to our very strict privacy policies, we believe that a large portion of them are people who live in the outer boroughs and people who are lower income New Yorkers. Next slide. So I've been talking a lot about the 9.5-foot kiosk that, as I said, most of you have probably seen. It's up here on the left on the slide. In 2001, we had some issues with the franchise, and that, and particularly as a result of the pandemic, it was determined that the advertising revenue that we were able to generate from the kiosks was not sufficient really to maintain the franchise. So the city at that time was also utilizing light poles, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, for allowing mobile phone companies to set up their equipment because New York is a place which is very difficult for a lot of the cellular companies to cover. So in 2001, we think NYC franchise was amended to do a number of different things. But one of them was to approve a new type of structure. In addition to the 9.5-foot structure, a new 32-foot, what I would call a smart pole was approved. Which would enable not just the types of services that I described to you previously, but also allow for the installation of other wireless equipment by, for example, mobile phone companies who were looking for places where they could provide a better service to their users. So if we go to the next slide. This is a photo of the Link 5G from various angles. The three on the left don't have an advertising screen attached to them. The three on the right do. Some of the installations that we ultimately have of the Link 5G will have advertising screens and others will not. We are typically prohibited, for example, from putting advertising screens in either in residential areas, so you'll never see that. But in other instances, we won't have an advertising screen for other reasons. For example, there may not be enough space on the sidewalk. Currently, the kiosks we have, the Link 5G we have deployed, none of them have the advertising screens yet, because it's taking us a little bit of time to get the advertising screens manufactured, but ultimately some of them will. For the next slide. And actually, I'm going to ask you to go one more slide further. Okay, so to take a step back about cellular communications and the different types of places that the mobile providers place their radios. Mobile communications started in the United States in a mass scale in the early 1990s. And the way the mobile providers provided service was largely as a result of putting big radios on big tall towers, similar to the structure you see on the left looking at this slide. And you'll still see these. You won't see these in New York City, but if you drive out into the suburbs, for example, you'll see these poles along, say, the Jersey Turnpike or large highways. That was the first evolution of where mobile providers place their equipment. Sort of these big poles with lots of heavy duty radios. But they quickly found out that as cellular phones became more and more popular, just placing their radios and antennas on these types of poles was insufficient to provide both the coverage, the different places that people wanted to go, or the capacity, making sure that your phone call didn't get dropped. So the mobile carriers then moved to another place to put their radios, which is the site you look on the left, on the right, I'm sorry, which is a panel of radios and antennas on a rooftop. So I would say that in New York City today, the predominant method used by the mobile providers to transmit their signals that make all of our mobile phone calls and our access to the internet over our phones work is through these rooftop installations. But even once the carriers started using rooftop installations, they realized that also is not going to be sufficient to ensure that their customers were getting the coverage that they wanted. So if we go back one slide, the next generation of places where the cellular companies were placing their radios was on light poles here in New York, which is what is depicted over on the left, or utility poles in the outer boroughs in some cases, sort of those wood utility poles that might be utilized by Con Ed or Verizon for their own purposes. The initial 4G, sort of the structure or the technology that was used, 3G and 4G that was used predominantly up until, say, 2 or 3 years ago, didn't look exactly like the one on the left. It had the box that you can see sort of in the middle of the pole. That still existed, but at the top of the pole, there was really just a stick, or what we call a whip antenna. So it was a smaller structure than what you're seeing on the left. But when 5G was developed, It was determined that there were a numbers of types of 5G services, which that type of whip antenna wouldn't work. So the city took time to develop a new pole top structure, which is essentially what you're looking at on the left, that sort of canister that exists on the top of a light pole. And as I said, mobile carriers are using companies to place those both on light poles or in some instances on utility poles, particularly in the outer boroughs. As I mentioned earlier, in the 2000-2001 period, it was determined that that was good, but there are certain limitations in light poles. Light poles were obviously made to hold lights. They weren't strictly made to hold this telecommunications equipment. And although the city did a great job in figuring out how can we retrofit these light poles to allow for cellular equipment, it was determined that we needed yet another place that would be beneficial for the wireless companies to ensure that they continue not only to provide the existing service, but as they plan out into the future, every year mobile communications traffic increases 20 to 30%. They constantly are in planning mode, trying to figure out where we can ensure where we can place radios, where we can place antennas to make sure that people's cellular phones continue to work at the levels that those people expect. If we skip 2 ahead, so how is Link 5G different? This is the first Link 5G that we deployed in New York. It's up in it's Burnside Avenue in the Bronx. It is a purpose-built infrastructure. That is, we designed it with cellular communications in mind, and therefore it is optimized for that versus, again, the light poles, which were really built for a different purpose. We also were thinking about how do we minimize street clutter and construction disruption. If you look at back 2 slides at the pole top installation, for example, essentially that's what we call a single tenant structure. The city has approved other structures which are somewhat bigger, which are called the multi-tenant structure. But all of those structures have significantly less space in them than does the Link 5G for mobile equipment. And while someone might initially say, well, that's good because they're smaller and they less of a aesthetic issue from my perspective. The problem is that if you put up one radio in a single tenant shroud, and then a second customer comes along, then you're gonna have to use a second pole. And you might say, well, so what? You use a second pole, but again, the light poles are not built for telecommunications equipment. When a light pole is converted or retrofitted for cellular communications, first thing the carrier does is rips it out of the ground because it either needs to be reinforced or replaced so that it can bear the weight of the cellular equipment. Light poles also are not connected to a fiber optic network. All of these poles need to be connected both to power and to a fiber optic network to basically when you make a call, the pole will go into that shroud, into the radio, and then it needs to go down the pole into a fiber optic network so it can be routed to your carrier. Light poles are not connected to fiber optic networks. So all of the light poles that are being used for cellular communications, not only are you ripping the light pole out of the ground, but you're also digging a trench from the light pole to probably a Verizon manhole to connect to a fiber optic network. So if you think about a situation where you might do that 3-4 times to satisfy wireless demand, that is essentially the Link 5G avoids issues like that because you can fit enough equipment in it to avoid repeated installations of new light poles. Other things of what the Link 5G is different. Again, it provides all the same services as the original kiosk. It provides the Wi-Fi, it provides the phone calling, emergency services, the other city services. One of the things about the program is that it initially was intended to replace the phone booths. When the program started in 2014 or so, there were 8,000 phone booths across New York City. As part of the franchise with the city, City Bridge, we removed all of those payphones With the idea being from a city services perspective, we were providing the same sort of service, except you don't have to use a porter anymore. And we were providing additional services. And frankly, we're taking up less street space than the payphones used to. Go to the next slide. There are a lot of restrictions about where we can and cannot place the Link 5G. As I mentioned before, you can't have advertising screens in residential zones. You can't put more than one of them on a block, just the block base. And there are a number of approvals required anytime we want to do it, from the city's Office of Technology Innovation needs to approve. The structure itself, or the design of the structure, was approved by the Public Design Commission. If we go on the street next to a park, we need the approval of the Parks Department. And if we go inside of a New York City designated landmark preservation district, we need the LPC's approval as well. Next slide. So this gives you, as Alice said, we're going to go through the actual individual sites. There are 8 of them, one of which we've already run into an issue from a historical preservation perspective. I'll go over those sites as well.
Not who should sense.
6 of the sites are located in the financial district, I would say, more or less, on the east side of Community Board 1.
Seaport,
I'm sorry, is there a question?
that's the Seaport District. Front Street, South Street, all of those are Seaport.
But none of them are located in a historical district, if that's, is that what you're getting?
Yes, they are.
That is the Seaport is a historic district.
We can go to, I don't want to take up people's time, but
Yeah, they're directly, they have adjacencies, so they certainly are looked at by SHPO with the understanding that they affect these sites, right?
I'm not saying that they are not nearby historic
You
districts.
need to explain that that's part of, it doesn't have to be in the site, it can be 2 feet away, or you're looking down a corridor at the historic site, and this is obviously something that you may not think is a good idea.
So one of the list of approvals that we do need to obtain, as I mentioned earlier, if the site is in a New York City designated historic district, we need to go to the Landmark Preservation Commission for approval. But every site that we submit or plan to build has to go through a process called Section 106, which reviews the proposed site and what effect it would have on historical districts and on historical sites within New York City. And this review is done by the New York State Historical Preservation Office. So each of the 8 sites we'll go through is under review by the State Historical Preservation Office. And as Alice mentions, what they're doing is they're looking at it and saying, okay, it's not in a historic zone, but I can see it from this historic zone, or I can see it perhaps when I look at that building down the street, which is historical on the National Historical Register Office. And what the State Historic Preservation Office does is determine whether they think it has an adverse effect on that either historic zone or on that historic building.
I just want to also, if I can just jump in, we had sent around a great deal of information to try to situate people with the history here of this. And I mean, I think some of you know that City Bridge had violated, federal requirement. Nobody knew about the fact of what you just described, Section 106 of federal law that required that SHPO and Landmarks looks at these sites. And it was thanks to Gerald Nadler, who brought this to the attention of City Bridge. And most every elected was appalled by the fact that they did not have the ability to review these things. And one of the results of this, if I'm not mistaken, and do correct me, Robert, if I'm wrong, is the one that I pointed out near us in Chinatown. That in fact is something that is now being considered as something that will maybe be removed, I heard in a recent meeting that you were at, because in fact it is across the street, if I'm not mistaken, from the city landmark, and clearly did not belong there. So I think, I don't remember, somebody had thrown out a figure of $200,000. I don't remember how much the structure itself cost to install it, and then to remove it is nothing short of lunacy, and it could have been avoided. So I just point that out as a little bit of history here in terms of the significance of something that didn't get reviewed before, and the lack of public engagement is one of the reasons why we're all here tonight, which is a good thing, and I thank you for that. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Okay.
Make sure we had a little history.
All right, so we've got 6 sites here, not really in the financial district, but essentially on the east side. And then if you go to the next slide, go down one ahead. Essentially, there's 2 located in Tribeca, just north and south of Borough of Manhattan Community College. So next slide after that gives the specific street addresses.
And how did you come up with them in terms of, like, that's the location?
A combination of factors, and like I said, there's a lot of rules about where they can and cannot go. So if I were to, put up a map.
They're both in residential areas.
I'm sorry?
They're both in residential areas, those two. And you said earlier that you can't have them in a residential area.
No, they're actually in, while I agree with you that people live in those areas, I believe all of those areas are zoned as commercial.
It's very part of a high-rise apartment.
It is commercial.
No worries. Just trying to confirm that with
Yeah, it's not, I
your
agree.
other comment, I was having a hard time.
So,
When I speak about residential, commercial, what I'm speaking about is just the city planning, zoning rules. Yes, sir. It's a good point, is I don't mean to convey that no one lives there or there are no businesses there.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to, maybe let Robert finish I jumped in and I shouldn't have also, but maybe just finish the presentation
Sure.
and then.
I'll go very quickly through each of the 8 sites and then we can open it up to questions. So this has the street address and the Latin Lounge, and the type of design. So the first structure, on the next slide.
and just the structure you're talking about, you will clarify which ones would look in each location of an ad versus non-ad, correct?
Correct. So the first one, they're all ad with the exception of 88 Pine and 110 William. So we'll go look at the first one, which is 66 Harrison. And this is located on Harrison Street. I think it's between Greenwich and West. It's actually inside I don't want to say it's inside of BMCC, but a BMCC building is both south and north of it. And as you can see from the photos, on both sides of the proposed location, there are actually overpasses where I guess people working or in BMCC can go back and forth between the 2 buildings.
So exactly where?
It's across from the townhouses,
No,
so
no, exactly where is the pole that you're talking about located? There are 5 lovely pictures here, but I don't see any sample pole for people to understand exactly whether it's a 9-foot pole, regular length. Like, is there
These would all be, this would be a 32-foot pole with an advertising screen.
And the
Where
advertising.
is that?
Picture of the, okay, so 32-foot pole, and just to understand, the advertising screen is 20, at this point is 28 inches, right? 2 foot 4, 2 foot 4.
32, something like that.
So we're talking
2.5
that,
feet?
okay? You have to understand scale
If
here,
we go
but,
back a couple of slides, Tammy.
and, you know, the Public Design Commission had asked for the same thing that we're hearing in this board, and I'm sure every other board, which is a siting plan that we could
Yes.
understand.
Yes.
Anyway,
That's it.
Okay,
So you're talking about the third one in, from the right, with the biggest, or are you talking about the one with the double screen?
all of those are actually the same structure.
so that's,
Yeah, it's just a different orientation, so you can see it from a different angle.
so that is,
Wow.
the screen is that.
do you have a rendering, like of a mock-up of what, of how it looks in each one of these sites?
I would want their picture out, right? That's.
Okay, but that is, you know, that is a critical missing piece that you've been taught, you know, that has been asked of you at every meeting, and our Public Design Commission asked for it too, and they got certain mock-ups, which we are not getting. But they asked for a site plan, like an understanding of what Tammy's saying, where in the site. We have to have that before we can really be helpful to you in finding this. It's an absurdity. Okay, I know I'm jumping in again, forgive me, but we're gonna have this at every site. We're gonna say, where is it? And I believe me, I've poured over these plans, very hard to find exactly where it is, but Tricia is right, it is located very near a number of landmark buildings.
And my question here is when you're talking 32 feet tall, right? And potentially nearly 3 feet wide for the advertising screens, right? You said it's somewhere between 28 and 32.
Yeah.
So 2.5 feet wide. These pictures do not tell me how close or far from the staircase it's going to be. How, if it's by the staircase or not, there's no actual understanding of exactly, does it go up and block the windows that are there from the school? How tall and how close is it to the overpass and in relation to the overpass? There's no sighting information here. It just gives me an address, but it doesn't tell me exactly where on the block it's going to be. Do you have that information?
We do have that information. The Latin Lounge on the top, obviously you can't see where that's depicted, but the Latin Lounge on the top will give you the exact location of where it is. Similarly, on our website, we have a map which shows the exact location. So if you look at the pictures, these are pictures taken from a survey that we did. Essentially, the top right picture, which says rear view, is the picture from across the street, and you'd be looking directly at where the Link 5G is. And the panorama one at the bottom is taking a picture from behind it.
So it would be in front of the windows of BMCC. Because where it says link rear view, if I'm looking across the street at it, correct? Then where the shade line is what you're talking about?
I think it's the other way around. So it would be, if you were standing next to the kiosk on the street, that's what you would see. Or let's look at the bottom. Bottom one I think is the best. So the bottom one is the panorama, which shows if you're standing at the kiosk, what's all around you. So you've got the staircase to your right. You've got the overpasses to your right and left. At least in this photo, you've got somebody parked in a car across the street.
Okay.
I've got to say this something.
So go ahead.
So that photograph, that person is standing directly in front of federal townhouses, and they have neglected or intentionally not on what they're standing right next to. So yes, if you're standing next to loft buildings from the 1870s and the federal townhouses that are right next to you from the early 1800s and late 1700s, and you look down with what this lens is a 25 millimeter lens. And if you look down the street with this distorted lens, you can create that view, right? But is that where we really want to be when we're talking about this? I think it's going to be much better for the community to be genuine about where these are going so that we can then, have a productive discussion about where the right place for these things are. I think it's not going to bode well to have that kind of thing going on.
It's a fair point, and we can certainly compare where depth photos can be better.
So
We're gonna insist, I have insisted that, and I think every board should have this, is that you have the mock-up. We have, for those of us who've taken the time, like Richard Foreman, bless his heart, or Tricia, to walk by there, or to print out, or all 91 pages of each submission, to find this plan, which shows where the plan is, and then, because he lives there, maybe walk by there. You can't ask that of the public. You can't ask that. You can't ask that of PVC. You have got to provide what every other agency provides when we're asked to evaluate the condition of any type of infrastructure that's being added onto our public sidewalks that we get to see. It's as simple as that. That has to be provided. So and it's an easy thing to do. As an architect, I know to make a mock-up is not that difficult.
So since we have the photographs that you've already provided, I'm going to request officially We are hearing this again in the landmarks committee, which will deal with the section 106s.
Okay.
And what we would like is a mock-up for that committee meeting. That'll be held September 23rd. That will show exactly where it is.
And by mock-up, you mean like the photos, Sarah?
Yes, the photos, just put it in there and then
Yep.
and then show the plan, which you have a very beautiful plan
Like how
next to it.
tall it is, like if it's next to this,
Yeah.
that walkway, like, is it in the walkway? There's also a part of
Just a
building.
scale drawing and also,
Well, we need the
Also-
views, we need the.
and also that view that architects also do,
Yes.
where you can spin around full circle from where these things are, not just facing one direction. That's gonna be huge here because our historic district definitely, borders a commercial district, but it's really important to understand the context of how that transition happens and how far it takes for that transition to happen,
The other thing on this that I talked to you a little bit about the other day was that you were smack dab in the middle of, and this is coming right after this moment, this part of our agenda, is the Battery Park City Authority's resiliency planning. And part of this is happening on the very two streets that somehow you want to identify as great places for these towers to be dug down, God knows how many feet.
And-
While they're
and
busy
it's
writing,
really
doing resiliency. It just isn't making sense. And if you're gonna convince the public that that's where it has to be done, then you've got to do that in tandem with whatever those walls are gonna be on both those streets. And obviously, when you selected these sites, you were not aware or were not focused on the Battery Park City plans. That was unclear to me, or were you?
I cannot say, I wasn't, but, maybe someone else in the organization, but certainly we've been made aware of that by DOT. And are in contact with folks to ensure that whatever construction we are doing is done in tandem with, in consideration of what they're going to be doing over the next few years.
Well, I'm just gonna point out that your locations that you have, which are now currently up on the screen for 100 North Moore, which is the second location on your list, is directly in the impact zone. That entire sidewalk from West Street to Greenwich on the south side will be completely redesigned and completely torn up. The whole thing. So I'm not really, I question the value of the dollars that would be spent for attempting to put anything in this particular location, knowing that the entire sidewalk will need to be ripped up and
Well, I think north, 100 would be on the north side.
Yes.
is it on the north or the south side?
Well, at least it shows on Google Maps.
But then we don't know. We don't have an
You can't tell.
estimate.
We'll be in.
Part of the problem.
Yeah.
is we don't
know the things.
It's over.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting, this type of coordination happens all the time with respect to whether it's the Department of Design and Construction, DOT, or individual even private property owners. So
Tad unusual, though, that we're putting in new deployable resiliency flood walls and on these for two particular streets. Somewhat unprecedented.
And I think sometimes sites are proposed with this understanding, or even down the road where it falls out. They may get approval for it at some period of time, and then 6 months later, when they're ready to build, some impediment to construction that renders the site unable to be built, or at least for some period. So, yeah, I mean, this coordination is.
That's exhausting. Go to.
It makes this even, this project that much more, frustrating to bring it to its final conclusion and define all the lengths that need to be deployed, because it's the big city with a lot of activity, as you all know. It just makes it very difficult for
So,
Many other instances, the reality is, we understand there's going to be an issue, we build, the issue doesn't happen, but in other cases, we do have some type of restoration or something else, and on numerous occasions in the past, what we do is we remove the structure for the period of the construction, and then we put it back after whoever is doing that, whether it's a private developer or the city itself, we replace the structure when the construction is finished. If you're planning to build on the streets of New York, you're
So-
going to have to deal with that issue, because people are building things all the time.
so pursuant to that, take a look at your next location that you sent photos on your next slide, not to push them along, but here we go. At 95 Wall Street, you're showing an existing 5G tower. Wi-Fi, whatever this is.
Yeah.
So that would be removed and a 32-foot tower with advertising put in its stead.
That is correct.
And so since you already have these photos, again, and you send it to us for next Monday, we'd like a full mock-up of what it would look like, because you already have the lovely street vendor there and the real world example.
I just have a quick question. Why 30 feet?
32 feet, Rich.
32 feet is the height of the light poles in New York City. So we picked a structural height that was the same as the light poles.
Even though you have the precedent for a 9-foot.
Okay. The reason why the 9-foot grew to 32 feet is when you're broadcasting cellular communications, it is significantly better to do it from a somewhat higher point than it is from a 9.5-foot point. 9.5-foot point is likely to have a lot more interference issues given its height than a 32. So most cellular carriers are going to, they want to be on the top of the light pole, the top of the utility pole. It is significantly less preferential to be at a 9-foot structure.
So if they're gonna do that, then why not go to the top of buildings? You know, we
So
have
contract
such an
goes-
opportunity to go ahead and do these on top of.
And that's what they've historically done for decades. I mean, that's traditionally how they create their coverage and additional capacity, but where the like kiosks or the light poles serve, you know, very strategic, very local purpose to add additional capacity where it's needed. So it may not be the financial district, but just adjacent to it or outside transit.
But why not on a building?
Many buildings are already utilized at that scale. There's a very limited amount of space that buildings can allow to be utilized for radios.
Buildings, especially in the financial district, sort of suffer from the other problem. They're too high. So you're going way down and you're not going to get as good a signal like you would from 32 feet.
And I mean, on the flip side, the link system is great from, you can charge your phones, you can make a phone call. We've been doing composting education on links uptown. Yeah, there are other positives on there further down.
Well, I mean, the problem too is that, you know, this is a community, remind everybody, Christine Todd Whitman said the air was safe. You know, the data on 5G is mixed. You know, I spent a lot of time on it last week. I'm the chair of the Youth and Ed Committee. That's why I'm here. It's not my committee. But I spent a lot of time on it last week. It's mixed. And what's interesting is the FCC is actually the disseminator and the one who controls it. And it's at odds with their mission. You know, like it's a conflict of interest. And so there are people that think that not all the data is really being reported here and that there is radiation that's troublesome with these towers. Now, I did see online, you know, your presentation is very clear. It's all online. The government has their site. But I just want to say that there are some of us that are going to be doing more research between now and the 23rd. And I, you know, as a youth chair, I am concerned about it. You know, the data for the 5G towers that were put in at Pittsfield, you know, that's very well documented. There's one paper on it. And I think, you know, we should be concerned. I think we should spend more time researching these things.
The two people I told about this meeting, each of them used the word, 2 words, cancer tower. Cancer tower. I don't want a cancer tower right outside my window. So right now, that's a perception that we have nothing to do with. This is just the perception of the general public.
I would say that is the perception of some members of the general public. It is not correct. At the end of the day, we've had cellular communications in the United States for 30 years. For 30 years, this is just a continuation of the same technology we've had. There is no confirmed studies that indicate that Link 5G or 5G service itself cause cancer. You had the FCC, I understand that you believe it's a conflict of interest. I'm not sure. Their view is that this is safe. They base their determinations based on studies of the FDA. And one so chooses believe that this is all some big conspiracy, that the FDA is in on it. But administration after administration comes to the same conclusion, that there are no adverse health impacts from cellular communication. And that is the overwhelming majority or bulk of the studies that indicated I provided some additional information to the community board that helps back that up. You can look through. Now, I know some people won't believe that. Okay. You can
Share that
believe that.
a little bit later, because I do have some of that, and I know Odette will answer too, but I think we're getting a little, it's a really critical point. We're gonna get to environmental right after this, but I think we should go through the 8 sites. So we are done with that and then jump into some of these general major issues. So
I
if
have
we can
one
do that,
quick
okay. So
question.
we can do a big
What's
night.
the radius of the, each tower of the Wi-Fi signals?
The 5G pole itself, right, is really, for the most part, just call it a container, right? It provides space, it provides power, and it provides fiber connectivity. It doesn't by itself have any radios in it. The installation of the cellular radios would be done by together with the cellular phone companies. And how far it goes will depend on what type of radios they're putting in. In some instances, they might put in radios that are very, very high capacity, that they have a lot of ability to reduce congestion on their network, but the signal might only go, call it 500 feet. In other instances, they'll put in radios that are similar in distance, I would say, to some of the ones you saw on those rooftop installations. Now we're talking several thousand feet.
Okay, so
Let's do the list of locations, and then, so everybody needs to hold until the end, right? And then we can do lightning round, quick questions.
Okay,
All right, so this is,
that's 95 Wall Street.
no, this is 88 Pine.
Next one is 88 Pine, which is in the intersection of Pine and I think French Street. And it's in front of a commercial office building. And they were also, I noted as I walked by the site the other day, doing construction on that street as well.
is this gonna, what kind is this? I know it's always a pole, but is it?
I believe this one has no ad screen. It has,
And is it replacing an existing link?
No.
So
the only one,
yeah, the only one going.
the only one is the Wall Street is.
So there's only one that's actually replacing the link.
Okay,
Yeah, and the only two without an ad screen are the Pine Street one we just looked at and the 110 Williams that we'll look at in a minute.
so this is Pine Street.
And-
And this is 75 South Street. Can you explain why they're around the same building in proximity? Because that looks like,
Yeah, they seem awfully close.
These are not next to each other. One is on South, so the one we're looking at now on 75 South Street is essentially looking across the street, you can see the FDR. So it's on South Street across from the FDR. The Pine Street one is in one block and I think up one block.
Taina. Go ahead.
Hi, how are you? Hi, I'm Tina Prado. I'm from the Downtown Alliance, the bid for the neighborhood. I'm also joined by my colleague Josh Nakowitz on our team as well, and I think he has a question. Before we go forward, can you share the screen? Because for people who are on Zoom, we're not seeing what you're seeing.
We did share the screen. So let's try this again and make sure.
Thanks for letting us know.
Can you see that now?
Yes, thank you. It was.
We can.
was shared for a bit of time, but then it stopped. That I think is what Tanya's referring to.
There we go. Yeah, but now they can. Okay.
All right, do you need me to back up, Taina?
I just wanted to say that before he kept on going because I couldn't as he went through the locations.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else, Dana, or we can keep going forward?
Yeah, we have a few questions, but I'll let you go through all the sites because I know you want to get through
Okay,
this.
All right. So, this is 75 South Street.
Do you have anything you want to add, Robert, to 75 South Street? This is,
You should walk ahead.
Okay.
Yes, let's
Next one is 55 Water.
So 55 Water is also opposite the FDR. It's a little further down, and this is the one, Alice, that you talked about a little earlier, which we got a ruling of having an adverse effect on a historic site. If you're looking at what's shown as the left view here, you can see a building, sort of a grayish
That's the
building.
police museum.
That is the first, I think, police precinct, which is a historic site. So this site is going to get moved. And my guess is it's going to get moved further away from that police precinct building down, this is actually on South Street, but down further south on South Street. I think there's a parking lot entrance to the right of this panoramic photo, so it'd probably go on the other side of that, parking lot. And then we would have it re-reviewed by the State Historic Preservation Office.
110 William,
110 William is on the corner of John Street and Williams, and it's next to an office building. And that office building, you can see there with the orange signs, that's, they're actually doing construction on that building right now. I think there's scaffolding that exists there right now.
Okay, so it's not gonna be in the park, right near the school.
There's a different site that's near school, and I don't know.
hold on, we're getting there. This is the next one, which is 8 Spruce Street,
Oh, that's
which
right.
Oh,
is
8 Spruce Street is that large residential tower
with
that
the
took swirled
school on
around.
the bottom.
There is a school now, although the address is 8 Spruce Street, that's because that's the address of the building that we're adjacent to. This site is actually on Beekman, which is 1 block south. And it's, you had asked Amy if we were gonna be where for example, the children were let off on the school bus. I went and walked by the site, the school entrance is actually on Spruce Street, so it's sort of the next block. And this site is next to the driveway of a parking lot. So I can't tell you for certain where the school bus goes, but I'd be very surprised if the school bus stops a block away from the school entrance in front of a parking lot entrance. And that's it.
Okay, thank
So-
you.
Just making sure everyone understands that but you had mentioned, oh, well, 5G is great. No one is,
I didn't say
but
that.
the link
The link of the.
right, these small 9-foot things that you can plug in and have free Wi-Fi. This isn't what's being proposed. That's going to be phased out, and what's proposed are the 32 plus
Oh, I didn't.
towers with the 30-inch
I
width.
rescind my comment.
Has all the features that
But
you
I-
mentioned ready to speak.
And the thing to-
Information on the link.
Yeah.
Keep doing that.
Anyway, I have a million things that I'm sure we all have. a million things. So let's go into the folks. So, okay, just at 7:20, we've got the entire battery park thing to do as well. So let's keep it moving along. Okay, in this room, people who bothered to, no,
Let's do people online.
no, I'm gonna, tell me, I still run in a meeting. People in the room, if you have any questions, comments, or such, please let me know. Anybody? Okay, Jeff, we'll start with members of the committee.
I saw the one at Mulberry Street in Bayard just before this meeting, and that is, it's definitely out of place. They're quite bulky. Most of these locations, I think most people wouldn't even, not all of them, but most of these along South Street or whatever, people probably wouldn't even notice them given the scale of everything else that's there. But my question is really as to the need from a 5G perspective, and I'm not concerned about the health issues on 5G. I'm persuaded that it's no different than anything else that we live with. But, and I would love to have more 5G coverage in fact, but it's unclear to me if there is actually a need for these particular locations. And as I remember in the Gothamist, I think earlier this week, I'm sure you're familiar with the article, indicated that in fact, none of them right now are occupied by any equipment. And so if the need were there, I'd be persuadable in some of these locations that these things are okay. Although certainly not in all locations, because they really are intrusive and depending upon the scale of the neighborhood. But it's unclear to me whether the need is actually there. Can you speak to that need in terms of, do the carriers really need these locations to put their 5G transmitters in?
Sure. So with respect to these 7 or 8 locations, each of them, essentially, I think someone had asked the question, how did you figure these out? And I started talking, but the answer is, we're driven by a number of factors, where we can go, where we can't go, where do we want to provide more Wi-Fi, a whole bunch of different things. But with respect to these sites, what was the driving factor is one of the mobile carriers telling us that they need more coverage in this area, and this was their preferred way of doing it. And ultimately, they are going to pay money to help provide this service in this area. So they are mobile carriers, may believe them, not believe them, but they're in the business of providing a service to a customer. They're in the business of making sure that customer service is good today. It's good tomorrow if mobile coverage continues to increase by 20 or 30% each year. So with respect to the sites that we're discussing tonight, they're the ones who are driving the locations based on what they perceive their needs to be. And once these locations are installed, our next step would be to assist them in installing the mobile radios, the 5G radios into these sites and connecting it to their networks.
What's confusing to me is that supposedly we have 5G coverage in lots of places in Manhattan already. And I don't know how many of these radios and antennas are necessary to support coverage. It would be one thing if, in my mind, if it was not practical to provide this coverage unless something along these lines were done. But if it's just an easy place for Verizon to put its new tower as opposed to beating on the door of the building where they normally would put them and where they're currently putting them, I have more of a problem with that. And sort of a similar concept, if these things would provide, I don't know, 30% of the capacity that's necessary in the next 10 years, that's one thing. But if it provides 0.5%, that's something else. I mean, can you speak to the percentage of coverage that these towers will provide?
In respect to your question of you don't want it to be a replacement for someone going on a rooftop, I can assure you that while they're doing this with us, they're also looking at rooftops because that is their main way of providing service, all right? All of the major carriers, with the exception of one, already have infrastructure on the rooftops where if they can solve their needs by simply putting another radio in the same place that they've already done with their landlord, that's going to be their preferred method of trying to solve a problem. This is at some level, requires a lot of complicated work in the streets for this to happen. But the carriers have decided, they said it's not just for this project, but to utilize poles over the last decade is really superior solution for them in many instances because they're going to be much closer in many instances in New York City to their users.
Yeah, but a street light isn't as much of a, I mean, we're used to those on the street and they're not as bulky, frankly, as these things. So what I'm kind of driving at is, I mean, I can understand why it's important to the vendor because it's a business model. But from Verizon or AT&T's perspective, is your entire universe going to add 0.5% to their capacity, or is it going to add 30% to their capacity? I'm trying to get a scale of the need that this thing is.
So it's a very, very good question and a fair one for sure. And I don't know if Rob can speak to this, the numbers and the capacity over time, but I would say we're at the very early stages of the 5G deployment. I mean, there's also rumblings we have heard of 6G on the horizon, but that's a later decade or more away. So having the infrastructure in place now, the physical infrastructure, albeit as bulky and noticeable and aesthetically unpleasing as many feel that it is critical, right? Having it ready so that we're not behind the curve, so that 4 or 5 years down the road, 5G gets more applications for 5G are realized, and we need more transmitters to handle the capacity. We have the infrastructure in place. The other part I would add, and this doesn't necessarily address that specific question, but I think it's worth noting, that a large part of this franchise is to promote equity, broadband equity, digital equity across the city. So while we're talking about clearly lower Manhattan, and some of the areas are not necessarily considered, any of them are equity districts per se, maybe.
None of ours are zero, not
But
one.
what this program does require that 90% of all new structures, 90% of these Link 5Gs are going in areas above 96th Street in the outer boroughs. So we're only talking about a relatively, very relatively small number below 96th Street in your district and in several others. And to fund that, to make sure that folks in the Bronx and Eastern Queens and Staten Island and everywhere else in the city gets the free public Wi-Fi, advertising, all the amenities we talked about, by structure. That needs to get funded somehow. And we realized very early on with the 10-foot, the 9.5-foot kiosk, advertising alone didn't cut it. It wasn't gonna be able to fund the entire deployment. Adding an additional revenue stream for City Bridge. City doesn't get a heck of a lot out of it, but we do get the ability to direct these kiosks to go to areas of the city that traditionally wouldn't get these types of services that are highly.
We have two hands up on.
Yeah, just a second. Is there, okay, and then I'm gonna go, because we have a couple of elections and some,
From the,
I'm sorry, could you say our two?
who's getting paid for this,
So,
and how much of it comes back to the district?
well, I mean, it 100% goes into the city's general fund, but these would answer the minimum annual guarantee from the franchise, and that's $3 million. So that's, that's
Full?
for to allow City Bridge to utilize.
Just
the
3
range-
million?
3 million up until a certain threshold. So in the contract, there's it escalates after you make a certain number in advertising or small cell revenue or any kind of revenue. Once they reach that number, it goes up to 8% of, it's essentially a revenue share. We're the city with 8%. So we're getting at least $3 million now. They're paying back, we mentioned I think earlier that the advertising revenue didn't cut it. So at some point, say the City Bridge stopped paying essentially their bills to the city, I think we alluded to earlier, they'll take back that amount in a lump sum and continue to pay back year after year. And it just creates, it's building, it's investing in the city. And I think that can't be discounted in terms of the, not just the monetary value, the 3% and the $3 million, but there's investment in the city in telecom infrastructure, which has tremendous value. So,
okay, thank you. I'm gonna have to speed up with some of these negotiations. Yeah, I got Josh Nakowitz from the Downtown Alliance, so sorry to do it. We sort of allow electeds and people who are working in major industries. So go ahead. Are you unmuted?
Josh, you can unmute yourself, but.
Hello, can you hear me?
Great, thank you.
Hi, thank you, Alice, for giving me the opportunity to weigh in. You know, we've seen a little bit of this presentation, and we have done over the last couple of weeks a little bit of outreach to some of our property owners. We haven't gotten much of a response yet, but we do share a lot of the community board's concerns and a lot of what we've heard tonight about the appropriateness of this infrastructure, particularly on some of the narrower streets in Lower Manhattan. Excuse me, like William Street and like Spruce Street. And I have to, on behalf of the Alliance, really echo Alice and Tammy's comments that it would be really, really helpful and in fact necessary for us to see some sort of rendering or some sort of image that gives us a much better idea, not just us, but our stakeholders and our property owners of how these pieces of infrastructure would fit into the rest of the built environment in Lower Manhattan. And in terms of a question, I would ask the folks at City Bridge, I'd be interested to know what, if any, outreach or communication you have had with some of the property owners that are directly adjacent to these installations.
We have not had any direct communications with any of the property owners. As you know, we've met with the Downtown Alliance. And in many instances, the business improvement districts that we meet with do exactly what you are doing right now, is talking to the local property owners. But our communications are generally through the community boards, through the bids, and through the local council members, not with individuals who own property in the city. And the presidents. And the borough presidents.
Understood. Thank you for that.
Okay, anything else, Josh, on behalf of the downtown?
No. We could move on. I know there's a lot of folks that want to weigh in.
Thanks very much, really helpful. Was it, Vera, did you have your hand up?
I just wanted to know, what is your vision? Or is it this, that you would want to put one on every block eventually? What is, I mean, where do you start with this and then,
So
what is, just come right out, say it. What is the plan?
I'll speak from the city's perspective, speaking on behalf of City Bridge. again, I don't mean to sound tone deaf, but we're talking about 2,000 kiosks throughout the city, 90% of which are going to be going above 96th Street in the outer road. So it's certainly not going to be on every street corner. Doesn't make economic sense for City Bridge. I don't speak for them to build one on every corner. The whole idea is to have, extend the Wi-Fi presence, through phone calling, all the other amenities, provide space for 5G carriers to consolidate their, not have to use a light pole, 2-3 light poles. Those, frankly, we have 6,200 light pole installations, both city-owned light poles, the metal light poles, and utility poles around the city. Many of which there's 2 or 3 at an intersection, and that presents some challenges also for the city. We can't use light poles for other purposes. It's often unsightly. Having them consolidated into a single structure where you don't have to have them every block, and frankly, the siting criteria wouldn't allow them to be that close to one another. I think avoids those type of clustering.
Yeah, that is just echo what Brett said, which is I've done a lot of meetings for Link 5G, but it's done it for single tenant structures similar to the pole top. In many instances, the complaints or the issues people raise there is exactly what you said, which is, are you gonna put this every block? When you're only putting in one antenna or one radio on one structure, then the answer is maybe. Because you need so many of them in so many different places, and the desires, at least in those areas, are often, can't you build one structure and put everybody together? That's essentially what this solution is, to try to reduce the clutter, reduce the number of installations one needs to have throughout the city to try to improve the city.
Taina from the Downtown Alliance.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. I wanted just to chime in and thank you for Josh for asking his questions and chiming in. I think, just for in terms of commentary, I don't have a question. I think we feel, the Downtown Alliance provides a free Wi-Fi service to the entire district and throughout the bid districts specifically. And, we're concerned about this being duplicative to a certain extent or duplicating services. I mean, we don't feel, and as Tammy has chimed in, that there isn't the need is not here compared to other neighborhoods. They really do need Wi-Fi and 5G service for their residents and businesses. So as a big picture, I really don't fully understand the need for this neighborhood to have these structures, given the grid network, the small sidewalks, sort of just a limited space that we have compared to other neighborhoods in the outer boroughs, and feel that I know people think or people assume that the bid is sort of the end all and be all for all property owners, and we do our best to have great relationships with those owners. But we have a very big district with a lot of different owners, and I think it would be better served if your project, if City Bridge did, a bit more outreach to stakeholders to get feedback from them to understand what the impact it may have on their specific buildings in the neighborhood. So, and last thing I would say, it seems like we're putting these structures in without necessarily having a provider to provide the service, right? So Verizon hasn't committed, T-Mobile hasn't committed, and the idea of putting these, physical, very large structures in the sidewalk before we have that seems somewhat counterproductive, or just doesn't make sense to me. So, it's really just a few comments. I don't have a specific question. We would definitely welcome images that show the rendering of the tower at the specific buildings, and I think that will resonate more with property owners because it's hard to describe what you're talking about without an image. So that would be helpful, and we would be eager to get those, and maybe we can then send another message back to owners and maybe get some feedback specifically from them. Thank you.
Thanks, Taina. Diane Stein.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I live in Independence Plaza, which is a large complex with about 3,000 residents, and it's near 2 of the proposed sites. And I believe I heard you say there was no radiation, but I'm just concerned about what potential environmental impacts that there might be from these towers? And also this, we're a downtown community. Many of us were here during 9/11 and were told that the air was safe to breathe. So, I'm a little, forgive me if I feel skeptical. So what assurances can you give to the community about the radiation or what are the potential environmental impacts?
Do you want me to respond or you want to go to the next question?
Oh, no.
Well, you sort of already responded, but.
Or whatever you want to do. I just didn't want
Well,
to leave
give
the
a,
question.
give a, give a quick summary of what you've already said earlier in the meeting. Denny might not have heard that, but.
Sure. Just quickly, we provided some additional information to the community board. We do not believe that there's any adverse health impacts from 5G or cellular communications in general.
You do not believe
There is not.
there.
I understand that some people believe there are, but if you really believe that there are adverse health impacts from cellular radios, I would posit that your bigger problem is that people are sitting around watching this meeting looking at a computer screen several feet from their face. If you're really worried about energy being transmitted wirelessly, your bigger concern is not a pole sitting on the street 32 feet in the air. It's the fact that you have a TV in your house or you have a computer screen that you stare at. Those are much bigger sources of energy wirelessly transmitted than 5G. But if you want to live in a world with none of those things, I can understand that. But 5G is not the real issue here.
Okay, I'm just gonna answer that. There are a lot, I appreciate you had sent us all sorts of articles. One I pulled up, many I had never heard of the journals with all this, I gotta think about this. But there was one from Forbes, and I thought it was fascinating. It starts out by saying what you're saying, which is all well and good. But then it says, and I have it pulled up on the screen here. That said, some experts voiced concerns. In 2017, doctors and scientists launched a petition to stop the 5G rollout in the EU, citing cancer risks. One worry is that since 5G is so new, there hasn't been time to properly test whether it's safe. There's also a lack of scientific analysis on the potential impacts of densely concentrated areas of 5G in populated cities or chronic 5G exposure. And it goes on. Additionally, many of the government-approved plans on radio frequencies were established in the late 90s and based on limited research. Scientists now don't think the issue is so clear, and some aren't staying quiet. To date, more than 3,500 physicians across preventative environmental medicine have united against 5G. And it goes on from there. So in your own evidence, if you will, that you sent to our board as proof that everything's grand, I thought it was very interesting when I scrolled down to read this, that in fact, there are indeed health concerns. And many boards, many of our electeds, including, I think it's Assembly Member Seawright, or is she a senator?
Yeah, Seawright,
Yeah, Assembly Member has legislation consideration of just basically to study it, that it really hasn't been adequately studied. So in fairness, yes, the World Health Organization says it's all grand. I guess the tobacco industry said the same thing 50 years ago. But, I think this article that you gave us was a great example from, Forbes Health that says, no, there are questions here and they really should be answered. So I provide that to whoever, and I will send around the document you sent us that can be circulated. But that's one of the documents.
I certainly didn't mean to intimate that there is no one who believes that is the problem. Odette will be here and will explain to you that she has very serious views about the adverse health impacts. But there is no topic one can talk about where you're not going to find someone, whether it's COVID or whether it's global warming, there are going to always be people on both sides of the debate. I just believe that the overwhelming scientific evidence indicates that there is no adverse health effects.
Yeah, okay.
Jill
Jill Lamanis.
and Jill, I've requested to unmute you, so you should be able to unmute yourself.
Jill?
There you go. Welcome, Jill.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you so much for letting me comment. I can hear only my own echo, and your sound system is hard to understand. But several comments. There was a lawsuit against the FCC asking for a review of the guidelines from 1996. The decision in the District Court of Appeals, District of Columbia Court of Appeals, remanded the FCC to go back and study the evidence. It had refused to review its guidelines. And they were sent back to study the evidence, some 11,000 pages of harms, biological harms, even at very low levels of non-ionizing radiation, especially on women, children, and the environment. They have not, that was, I'm sorry, August 21 was that decision. Environmental Health Trust and Children's Health Defense Fund. Now, they have not responded to that. They have not reviewed or changed their guidelines. And at present, there is no agency measuring or monitoring the output of these poles, these radio things. And we do not know the aggregate effects of all these poles, rooftops, poles, streetlights, manhole covers, wherever they are. So we have no idea what we're being exposed to. Secondly, if that was first, yeah, the aggregate exposure with all the new cell phones. The other thing is that Americans seem to have a philosophy that more is better, especially businesses. In this case, less is better. The very minimal amount of emissions to accomplish the communications would be much wiser. And it's not being looked into properly. So that's my beg, that we look for minimal amounts that can still get people connected. Okay, I think that's about enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Theodore Barato, welcome. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I thought we were done in, I'm sorry. Oh, excuse me.
I requested Theodore.
Okay, after Theodore, Rob.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Go ahead.
Yes.
I can,
Nora, we can hear you.
okay, great. Thank you so much. So, while I was executive director of Environmental Health Trust, a scientific think tank, you can go to ehtrust.org. We won in our lawsuit that was just discussed against the FCC, and that's regarding the agency's lack of review of its RF radiation limits. That includes cell tower radiation exposure limits. They are unchanged since 1996. So it's not accurate to say that administration after administration comes to the same conclusion. There are no health effects, because there actually has not been a proper review of all of the science, not just cancer, but impacts to the brain, reproduction, oxidative stress, and so forth, especially birds, bees, and trees. That simply has not been done. Now, the FCC was ordered in August of 2021, 3 years ago, to explain how does its limits for what we're allowed to be exposed to protect children who are more vulnerable, birds, bees, and trees. In terms of long-term exposure, they gave a list of 5 things, actually. And the FCC did not respond, as was just addressed. They cannot explain how these limits are protective. And I'll note that several other countries have limits 1 to 100 times more stringent than what the U.S. has. We allow among the most radiation of all the countries, along with several other countries. And a Harvard investigation that you can look up by Norm Alster found the reason is that the FCC and other agencies are under regulatory capture, where the wireless industry has undue influence into the policy and science. But in addition to the radiation health effects issues, and if you're interested, please go to ehtrust.org or go to wildlifeandwireless.org for more on environmental impacts, or just Google evidence for a health risk by RF, that's radio frequency, which comes out of cell towers, on humans living around mobile phone base stations, which are cell towers in Europe, from radio frequency sickness to cancer. It's published in the journal Environmental Research for a good review. However, in addition to the radiation issues, there are the
We're gonna have to
FCC.
wrap it up.
Oh, okay. Can I say,
Very
can I,
long minutes. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
oh, okay. Thank you.
thank you very much. I know we're gonna have I just want to say to everyone, we're gonna have a very brief presentation from Odette Wilkins in a few minutes that will touch on a lot of the environmental concerns. So I would ask the people that are familiar with her organization and much of what she has researched and done, not to repeat what she will probably be saying, because we have a limited amount of time. Thank you. Richard Foreman.
Yeah, thanks. So I'd like to kind of segue back to the locations that we're talking about here, which is our district. And I'm now very confused as to why they're being pursued here now. One of the questions that I had seems to have been answered, which is that there is no demand from the carriers. There's no agreement with the carriers at this point to use this. Are there contracts in place for the carriers?
We have a contract in place with the carriers, and each of these 8 sites was chosen by a carrier. That carrier is committing to these sites, so it is not factually correct to say that there are no carriers interested in these sites. These sites exist because a carrier asked us to go to these places.
And there are, you are correct, there are sites throughout the city that are installed today that do not have carriers, but these are not among them.
So these sites here, they have carrier commitments, and is that is the revenue source that you're seeking out of these? Because what you said before is that the reason to put, if I understood it, the reason to put these towers here in our district, which already has exceptional 5G service. I can't walk anywhere in this area without having 5G. Is to generate sufficient revenue to cover the other parts of the city that are not so well provided. Is that a fair statement? Between the advertising perhaps and the carrier, which are there other revenue sources?
My statement is probably an overstatement on my part, but it's part of the equation. So yes, it does produce an added revenue stream into the company, the franchisee. The advertising is ultimately the main source of revenue that funds the deployment of links throughout the city. But yes, small cells is an added element to that.
So the reason to do these sites at this point is to generate revenue, not necessarily for the service, because we have no real need at this moment for
I
the
wouldn't
service.
say that, given that they do have carrier commitments, that's the primary purpose for these
Yeah, but-
particular sites.
You've got a client telling its consumer that they need something that we, the buyer, hasn't said we need. That's backwards.
Yeah, I think Rob, I think it's very telling that a carrier would want to invest in these locations. They're not gonna just throw money at know where the problem doesn't exist. And while you very well may see 5G on your phone, as I do on my 2 devices.
Yes,
It
you
doesn't
will.
necessarily mean that the added capacity is there to handle the demand at certain peak hours of the day, and I'll certainly speak to that in more detail. So what may appear as, yes, there's 5G, from, well, river to river across the city and there really isn't necessarily sufficient capacity to handle the demand. And that's really what these links do. Whether it's AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, any wireless carrier is not going to invest in a site where just to get redundant extra service where it's not needed. So I think that is, it shouldn't be understood.
I have a question.
One last question, if I may, it's just a separate one. 5G to 6G, whatever that may be, how will these towers address that?
They will continue to provide the same service regardless of the technology. As I mentioned before, the structure itself is really just the housing for the radios. And it provides a space, it provides power, it provides a fiber connectivity, and the top part has an RF transparent shroud. The 5G radios are selected by the mobile carriers to go in there. When at some point in the future, we shift to 6G or maybe even another generation of 5G, what would happen is the carrier would take their equipment out and they would replace it with the 6G. Typically, frankly, what has happened isn't that they've replaced one with the other, they've added a new one and they've place sort of an overrun. So they might put in 6G and get rid of 4G somewhere else. It's what's happened traditionally, but certainly the structure itself should be good for multiple generations of services.
So, we've talked about this a little bit about the planned obsolescence, supposedly 6G comes out 2028, 2030 is what I have read. So we're talking about 5 years. 5 years ago, you had the 5G link kiosks that we see. Those are real kiosks, these sort of little buildings where you plug in, not poles. These are now being phased out, as you yourself have said, and phased in are this new pole. And there is absolutely no assurance that maybe 6G becomes smaller. Maybe there's some way that you have a new formula and a new form that goes with it that allows for something very different. And I think that's a good point as to exactly what we are going to get down the road and why we are so assured that this will necessarily meet the great future, in terms of what comes next down the road. I mean, I have to say, I just want to bring up a couple of things because we are writing a resolution tonight, sort of, it seems, to go over points that I want to make sure included. Something else that comes up a great deal is privacy issues. I know when Link first came out, I was one of the sole voices on this board to vote against it because I did think there were privacy issues. You walk by these things and you have no idea what's being picked up. It's a wireless cell phone. It can pick up anything, unlike some sort of optic cable that's underneath the ground, as little as I understand. This, is really open to privacy issues. And I always wondered about it, and I bothered to go and listen to the June 7th hearing on the New York Council on Technology, and the New York Civil Liberties Union comes to this meeting and points out violations of Citybridge's privacy policy found by OTI audit, and that after 9 years of Link New York City operation, there remains a lack of disclosure on detailed list of sensors included in the links and how it uses personal information it collects. I have no idea about the case and it doesn't really interest me, but I think what interested me was that there are many groups, including ones that I think are pretty well respected, that are really pointing to potential privacy issues that haven't yet really been drilled down or fully understood. It's something that I think we should fully understand. How much information is being given to somebody else? How do you control this? It may not be a question for tonight, but it's something that I know, I don't think I'm alone in addressing. It's a question. Absolutely.
The Link NYC privacy policy, which exists and is audited by the city, is a more stringent privacy policy than you will find in any internet connection that you have. So the phone provider, the person who you get internet access from at home. And like I said, it is reviewed by the city, and then the city had a third-party auditor. We do mention that the auditor found an issue in that certain information that we were collecting, we had encrypted instead of hashing, meaning that we couldn't turn it back. Since that point, we have corrected that issue, but the audit indicated that no personal information had ever been disclosed by Citybridge. When we get we get subpoenas from the district attorney's office or from the police about individuals using the kiosks. Our answer to them is uniformly, we have no idea. They'll send us a picture of someone using the Wi-Fi at such and such location. And the answer is, we don't know anything about the person. We have no idea what they looked at, nor can we find out. And that has been a uniform response to subpoenas over the course of the last decade. We know very, very little about our users. The only information that we collect is when they sign up, they give us an email address. Doesn't even have to be a correct email address that we use to give them updates on the Wi-Fi terms and conditions and for surveys. That's it.
Okay, thanks. I have a number of points, but I'm just going to do one more here, which is the equity issue. When I've heard many of these presentations, originally at PBC, it was all about equity. There were, as I recall, 13 equity districts. Up comes a slide showing exactly where they are. And we are told this is urgent and the need is extraordinary. And I don't know, based on surveys of 1,000 people by HRNA, or I don't know what, from many years ago, but whatever, convincing us that we really need this right away. So I still don't understand why now in Manhattan, in an area that is the wealthiest zip code in New York City, or one of them, why is this so an urgent need to put these in our neighborhoods? When in fact you have 13 equity districts, which I understood was part of your contracted agreement with the city of New York to put those in and put those in quickly. So why are we wasting our time, if you will, coming into Greenwich Village, the Upper East Side and Lower Manhattan? Is this all just about money? Is it all because we're gonna be paying more for the products that are sold on these screens? I mean, I want that answered. I want to know why we have to have this.
Since
No,
2000,
not the general thing, specific to this area, based on what you've heard. You have 4,000 that you're allowed to roll out, 90% are supposed to be in high need. We are of the 10% in our district. We have, even in the locations that you're looking, free Wi-Fi provided and many other services, so we are not a desert. We are not in that 10%. So exactly, and you said that there are carriers who you have, so none of these are being built on spec. You absolutely, once they're built, have someone who will be paying for each location. So that's the baseline we understand. I don't want the big picture, I want the.
Okay, so in answer to my question, which was the equity districts, why is that not being prioritized and why Manhattan? And the question, why? In the most expensive areas in New York City, in Manhattan, Upper East Side, Upper West Side, Greenwich Village, Tribeca, by that.
looking at a small slice of the overall program, since 2001, we have installed 358 kiosks. 277 of them have been in the equity districts that you have mentioned. Only 15 of them in total out of the 358 that we have deployed have been below 96th Street. And 14 of them were in Manhattan Community Board 3 on the Lower East Side, because that's one of the equity districts that was pointed out by the city.
But
So
why
there's
here?
been one installed below 96th Street in the below 96th Street in Manhattan, since 2001.
But that isn't a desire, you're rolling them out, if they're coming out, we're getting 7, CB2 looked at 13, the Upper East Side had 12, whatever it was. Why are you even looking here? Why isn't the City Bridge not just going down with those 13 equity districts and going down the line and getting those? And it's unclear, is it 4,000 or 2,000 by 2025?
The total number of kiosks by the end of the franchise would be 4,000.
And poles, not kiosks, poles, poles, right?
The number of kiosks that exist currently is about close to 2,200. So if all of the balance of the new ones that we put out were Link 5Gs, that would give us roughly 2,000 or so kiosks.
I don't.
Kiosks to the poles, that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
We don't consider them kiosks, we consider them poles, because they're 3 stories tall. A kiosk is something in the general DCP world that we work in that's human scale, not 3 stories. Just so you understand, dialogue.
So 4,000. So again, the question is out there. I don't know, why we're even having this meeting right now, until such time as the other 90% are in areas that really need them.
I mean, I'm not aware of any requirement that says that we have to do the 90% before we have to do the 10%. I believe the franchise provides us to be able to go out and do 4,000. Ultimately, of the incremental kiosks we deploy, as Brett said, 90% of them need to be above 96th Street or in the outer boroughs.
But the whole point of the program, the way it was introduced to the city, was about the digital divide and bridging that divide. So that's what I don't understand. If that's the point.
I also think we shouldn't lose sight. Yes, you mentioned one of the richest, if not the richest in the city. People from all over the city. I grew up in Canarsie, Brooklyn, not the richest. I grew up in Bayview houses, New York City housing authority. Certainly not the richest part of the city. I used to come to work every day on 23rd Street, my first job, first day on 23rd Street. People come, as you well know, I don't it's not anybody, from all over the city. And that helps bridge the digital divide. The home health aide is going to service a senior citizen in Lower Manhattan, needs connectivity. They need to charge their device. They shouldn't just have to do it when they go home as nurses.
But it already exists here.
Where are they their device? As they're running to get to the bus. I mean, I'm not
You showed us one in a site that you're looking to replace. There is an existing.
Oh, for sure, but there.
And there are
should be
other
more.
locations all around the district that are free.
No question, and I think we can certainly augment what's there currently, that shouldn't be it, like, we shouldn't consider that job done, mission accomplished.
Unfortunately, this could go, as we forecast, this could go on for many hours, but we have a huge agenda, and it looks like Odette has to go soon. So I think I have to ask the people that still have their hands raised. Odette will be speaking on the same topic, so maybe we'll take the questions after, but I don't see how we don't want to lose you. So I guess, do we have any specific other questions for City Bridge at this point? I think, I'm trying to do this.
I think that if they would like to stay through the next presentation, they're certainly welcome to do so. It's,
I've heard Ms. Wilkins many a time. I'd love to stay, but I'll stay with it. In this district or around the city?
Below 96.
How many have been, so there's the 16 you said that have been installed below?
Below 96th Street.
and how many are pending in
Non-equity districts.
Well, I'm just looking at the Upper East Side
If you
and
can
the.
bring that
CB2.
information and send that to us before Monday, it's part of what we're asking. With the photos and the images of the 32-foot poles on the 8 sites.
Are you able to do that? Because otherwise, I hate to be the person who has to do that, but I would. So your office will be able to do the mock-ups?
I don't know, I'd have to go back and.
Okay.
We'll let you know.
Like this week, okay, because that would be great, because I think that's essential, and I can't imagine that's not gonna get you into trouble every meeting down the road, but, okay. Could you just, before you leave, just give us where we are with PDC? You had done this at another meeting, but I think it would help the public to understand what the Public Design Commission has asked you to do at this point with the pilot program that I think we're talking about, and
Certainly, the
Thanks.
Public Design Commission has given us 2 separate approvals. One was for deployment other than in residential or historic districts. And then secondly, an approval for pilot in residential and historic districts limited to 200 sites. As part of that pilot approval, they also gave us a number of requests to come back to them with feedback based on those deployments. I believe at this point we have 17 sites that have been deployed in residential districts. And we are working together with OTI to provide some additional information back to the Public Design Commission. I don't know what they'll do with it once they get there, whether there'll be another hearing or how they'll respond.
And it's just underscore that point. The pilot is for residents zoning districts, not mixed use, not where it's not,
but they didn't have to be in equity districts? I thought that was a prerequisite.
for the residential pilot, no, it's just a limit of 200.
Does the PDC need to approve the ones in our district?
The PDC just approves the design in general, doesn't approve special locations other than this overall approval for different zoning districts.
And that's pending or has it occurred?
That has occurred.
Well, it's occurred with the understanding that you would be coming back and that you might look at different designs. I mean, they called these, the words they used were aberrant, obscene. I mean, I couldn't believe the meeting, but they were not happy with the design. And so they were looking at ways to assure that, residential areas didn't get them and they wanted you to come back. I mean, that was my interpretation of this, right?
That's correct, yeah, and again, but that's limited to the residential, the commercial, manufacturing, commercial overlay districts. They have no such requirements to go back for review, but yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. And then I think we're going to jump in. I really appreciate your time and your patience. It's not an easy topic, needless to say. It has a lot of moving parts. Okay, so Odette Wilkins, it is Wilkins, not Willens, right? Yes, is the general counsel for Wired Broadband and also for New York City Alliance for Safe Technology. I first heard about her, I think, in the New York Times article that was published in June about whether we need these towers. I think it was called, Does New York City Really Need These Giant 5G Towers? She was the person that they interviewed for it, and she promised me 7-minute max presentation on the environmental aspects of this. I think it's based, I've asked her, only based it on fact, not opinion. And that should sort of close out, I hope, the environmental stuff on this, because we do have still another agenda item. So go ahead.
Well,
Okay.
thank you very much for having me, and Mr. Dakota, I'm glad that you're here. He's always here for my presentations. I just want to tell you a little bit about my background. I'm actually a corporate transactional attorney in technology. And I've been doing that for over 20 years, and I've represented some of the largest multinational corporations in the world. You can check me out on LinkedIn. And so I know a little bit about technology and about the obsolescence, the innate obsolescence that's in technology. I also am chair and general counsel of the National Call for Safe Technology, which comprises well over 100 community groups and individuals around the country who are having the exact same issues, the exact same problems, and they do not want those cell towers anywhere near them. And many of the issues that are cited are, as you can see, health, public safety, nuisance, privacy, reduced property values, and ugly and obtrusive design. Now, we have now 16 community boards that have either gone through moratoria or are direct opposition or disapprovals for these 5G towers, and that represents 25% of New Yorkers. I'm also in touch with other community boards who are also planning on opposing this. Next slide. As you can see, these towers are being placed very close to buildings. There is no setback requirement. There's a setback requirement for the backpack antennas that are being placed on light poles, but for these can be as close as 6 feet out of somebody's window. So that's a lot of radiation. The second picture, you can actually see how small the people are compared to the structures. That's not a kiosk, that's a tower. Next slide. And so there are 5 bays. The very bottom bay is the free Wi-Fi. The 2 top bays are 5G, and the next 2 bays are 4G. So the 4 of the bays are for commercial purposes. The last bay at the bottom is for free Wi-Fi. Next. Now, these backpacks, we haven't discussed these backpacks. These are 4G, and sometimes they're converted to 5G small cells, and they are an existing utility poles. Over 7,000 have already been installed. About 3,000 have already been approved to be installed in addition, and about another 3,000 are proposed. So that is a total of about 11,000. So why do we really need the 5G cell towers? Next. This is a pole top, which was reviewed, this is a view out of a 3rd floor apartment window outside of a child's bedroom. So the amount of radiation is going to be enormous. This is on Lexington Avenue, 53rd Street. As you see, there's a rooftop farm on this building. So there's a lot of coverage. Next. These are the 5G towers in my neighborhood. I'm in Rego Park, Forest Hills, and there's already graffiti, as you can see. Next. And this graffiti is on both sides of the tower. This is on Queens Boulevard. Okay, so the big issue, the big premise is that 5G is supposed to bridge the digital divide. It will not, because they are designed for street use, they're not for home use. That's just a given. And for 5G subscription services, who's going to be able to afford the 5G? And then when it goes to 6G and 7G, there's already discussions about 10G. So we're already getting behind the 8 ball here. So the economic model, and this is something that I have experienced throughout my negotiations with technology companies, is that what they do is they artificially retire their services or their products in order to generate more future revenues. They're in the business of making future revenues. That's their economic model. And so wireless is no different, and there's planned obsolescence in order to generate future revenue. 3G is now retired. Even though people had a fully functional 3G phone, they did not want a smartphone, they just want to be able to make a phone call. They cannot do that anymore. And now, this is a friend of mine who got a 4G phone, and she said it doesn't even work as well as her 3G phone. So advancement doesn't mean that it's going to be better. Next. So we're talking about digital equity, and I'm very sorry that this slide is so small, I didn't realize it. In terms of digital equity, 5G is likely to exacerbate the digital divide. And that is a report from the US Government Accountability Office. And the National Digital Inclusion Alliance testified in Congress saying that who's going to be able to afford a 5G phone? And when we had the June hearing at the New York City Council, a Harlem community leader said that 5G is creating the digital divide. And there's also devaluation of property values up to 20%. No one's going to want to live near a cell tower. Next. So right now, fiber is really unmatched in speed, availability, and capacity, as well as cyber security. So that is really the alternative. And the NTIA has affirmed fiber to the premises as being a national priority, even though the NTIA now has gotten pressure from the wireless industry to start introducing wireless. But the former FCC chair, Tom Wheeler, has testified in Congress in 2021 saying that fiber is future-proof and wireless should only be used as a last resort, that we've given so many subsidies to corporations and they promised us ubiquitous service and that never happened. So in terms of the fiber benefits, it's once and done, basically. You put it in at least for 25, 50 years, and wireless has a capacity of maybe about 5 years, a lifespan of about 5 years. It requires constant maintenance. So who's going to be paying for that maintenance? Consumers. So the model for New York City, for instance, could be Chattanooga, Tennessee. Do you know that they have 600 square miles of fiber to the premises? And they have the fastest internet in the United States, and they have one of the fastest in the world. And now they're going to quantum speed because of their fiber network. They own the fiber. It is municipal fiber. So they are leasing the fiber to the telecom industry. And that is providing a windfall, which is allowing them to give each household with a school-age child free internet. So they don't even need the affordable connectivity program because they have become self-reliant and self-sufficient. That is the model for New York City. We have not done that. Next. One of the issues regarding fiber is that one of the selling points is that this is going to be free fiber. Well, is it going to be free fiber in New York City? Well, not exactly, because I have to read this from my, okay, because the fiber that City Bridge is laying is free to New York City. But if City Bridge is using a third-party fiber provider and the franchise with City Bridge ends, those third-party fiber providers may charge New York City market rates at the expiration of the franchise agreement. I'm assuming that's correct. That's what I read in the agreement. Now, New York City would have to make perpetual payments to those fiber providers to maintain fixed wireless broadband. Okay, that's not the Chattanooga model. We should be Chattanooga used to be the armpit of the Western Hemisphere, and now it is known as Geek City. They are the tops, one of the tops in terms of technology. New York City is falling way behind now, and the fiber architecture that's being put in for fixed wireless facilities is not necessarily compatible with fiber architecture to the premises. So that is a bit of a problem. Now, with respect to fiber, do you know that we already paid for fiber to the premises to every single person in New York City from the surcharges that they charge us back in the 1990s for our landlines? That was supposed to be only for fiber to the premises. That did not happen. Where did the money go? Okay, so did it get siphoned off to the wireless enterprises? Now, Mayor de Blasio did a settlement agreement with Verizon to build out fiber to 500,000 homes. He did not go far enough. He did not tell Verizon, you did not provide the promised service to all of New York City. So next, so the problem is, where is the gap in service? Why are these towers being placed where they're being placed? And because at the Lower East Side, we don't have a gap in service. Why do we even need them? And how do you determine where they're going to be placed? And you know the answer that has been given is that the telecom carriers say that it is their proprietary information. I'm sorry, if you're using New York City assets, it's not proprietary anymore. You have to be transparent in your information. You want to use New York City assets in order to make a profit, then, then you need to tell us exactly why they're there. All right, so now we go to the federal law in New York. The federal law in New York states that you must prove a gap in service. You must provide evidence that there's a gap in service and you're using the least intrusive means possible to fill that gap. The FCC brought forth a rule in 2018 or 2019 that gave the industry the right to put wireless infrastructure wherever they wanted. As long as they determined what the capacity need was for future demand, they got it, and they did not have to show evidence of a gap in service. There was a court case in 2022 in the Eastern District of New York. A senior federal district court judge said not so fast. In New York and in the Second Circuit, you have to prove evidence of a gap in service. And there was Village of Flower Hill in Nassau County that said no to a whole bunch of 4G applications. And they got sued by the telecom industry because of this FCC rule. We can put them anywhere we want. Well, what happened was that the court said, no, that FCC rule does not apply in New York jurisdiction. And what do we have here? We are being told that you have to have the 5G towers, and we have to place the 5G towers here. That was purely a contractual obligation. The contracts did not preserve New York City's rights to say no based on evidence of a gap in service. They cannot provide evidence of a gap in service. There is no evidence of a gap in service. Now, in terms of environmental review, there was an environmental review done by New York City, and they said no significant impact on energy consumption. Well, that's very interesting because the industry recognizes that 5G is power hungry and can consume 3 to 4 times the energy required for 4G and maybe up to 61 times by 2030. Next. Okay, I'm so sorry, that did not come out. So in terms of a proof of concept, so we heard about the pilot program of 200 required for City Bridge to get community input. Well, there's been massive opposition from the community boards, which I indicated, opposition from government representatives all over the city, city, state, and federal, and then opposition from all of the historic preservation organizations. Next. So I decided to do some FOILs, which is Freedom of Information Law request, in order to find out, are they compliant with the FCC emission limits? Did they do visual impact studies? Did they do a power potential to determine, did they have any information regarding the power potential, frequency bands, electrical drawings? What are the gaps in service? What are the propagation maps? Did they do drive-by tests? How about permits and authorizations? Are there any denial of service reports? None. I got zilch. Okay, and this has been outstanding for 2 years, and I keep getting extensions. Okay, so now the next thing is the letter to City Bridge 2023 by the FCC. We already discussed that. We don't have to repeat that, but it was for historic preservation and environmental policy review. Okay, so now the big question is 5G safe? I am so sorry. I don't understand why that it's all blanked out.
It's not, I mean, it's there. It just
The color of the font is probably.
Well, it's black.
on her screen.
It's black print. I have black print on there. Anyway, so is 5G safe? Is the basic question that everybody's asking. First of all, there's been no pre-market testing of 5G. Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut questioned in 2019 the telecom executives, and he said, "Are there any independent studies that are being done on this?" And they said, "None that we know of." So he said, "Oh, so we're flying blind here as far as health and safety is concerned." Okay, and we're still flying blind. The WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer classified wireless radiation, 2G and 3G, as a possible human carcinogen in 2011. The scientists, some of the scientists on that working group are now calling it a human carcinogen. The New Hampshire Commission found, they did a bipartisan commission in New Hampshire, and they found harm from wireless radiation, and it was specifically to study 5G below the FCC limits. Now, the next thing is that there have been 8 studies since January of 2023 that shows adverse health impacts from exposure to 5G and towers. So previously healthy individuals, these are elderly people in their 60s, they're people who, young people, guys who were working, previously healthy individuals developed typical microwave syndrome symptoms shortly after the towers were installed. Headaches, abnormal fatigue, heart arrhythmia, burning skin, and trouble concentrating. So, so you're wondering, how is it that, that the industry can get away with this? Next slide, please. As you know, the FCC was sued because there were 11,000 pages of scientific peer-reviewed studies showing harm within their limits. So this has been a safe harbor for industry to shield them from personal liability for personal harm. And that is from the Telecommunications Act, where the telecommunications industry lobbied very hard in order to make sure that there could be no legal liability to them in so long as they're within the FCC limits. So there's no motivation to change the FCC limits in order to be protective for human exposure. Next. Okay, so this is what happens to a child, a 5-year-old child. This is a cell phone, and that's electromagnetic radiation. It's all electromagnetic radiation. So with a cell phone, it goes mostly through their entire brain. A 10-year-old child, about half the brain, and an adult just partially. Next. So now you see a chart where the people who are living closest to a cell tower have all of these symptoms, okay? So that includes fatigue, sleep disturbance, headaches, difficulty concentrating, irritability, hearing disruptions, and there's also cardiovascular arrhythmias, tachycardia, there's AFib. And so people who are living farther away have fewer symptoms. Next. Okay, so if you look in your wireless your cell protection plan, you will find that they characterize electromagnetic radiation as a pollutant. And so they do not claim any responsibility for that. And insurance companies, the Swiss Re and Lloyd's of London will not insure for personal injury from wireless radiation. So just to address some things, there have been clusters in Pittsfield. There have been 17 people who got very sick. Children were vomiting in their beds, and people had to evacuate their homes. Ripon, California, there was a cell tower placed right outside an elementary school, and there was a 10-year-old child who came down with glioblastoma. His playmate came down with kidney cancer. Another child came down with liver cancer, and 5 teachers came down with breast cancer. Once that tower was removed, there was no more incidence of cancer, but that child with the brain cancer just died. There is a cluster in Idaho where after 5G towers were installed, people are getting AFib. And so there is a cluster of AFib there. People.
Okay, we're gonna have to.
Okay.
I don't think we have a very convincing argument, but we really do have to.
Okay, just one more point.
Sure.
Okay, so Swisscom is a major telecommunications company. In their patent, they state that they wanted to devise a lowering of their wireless radiation, and the reason they gave was because of the high cancer risk. That's it.
Wow, you did that very quickly, and thank you. That's very important information, and I appreciate it. And so.
And by the way, I'm wearing this because I am now affected by the wireless radiation in this room. I have measured it. It's at 18,000 microwatts per meter squared. I am affected personally. I have had to go to the New York University Hospital because I got hit with tachycardia because of the immense amount of electromagnetic radiation at Penn Station.
How much is in here?
It's 18,000, which is off the charts. And so I started getting very ill. And this is a shield. This shields me from the radiation, which allows me to even be here, because before I started to present, I was feeling very sick. So I'm a technology attorney, and it has affected me. And I didn't see it coming.
I'm sorry to hear that, and I appreciate you sharing that.
I am.
Wow, all right, well, this is it.
I know, but it's a shield. It's a shield.
Yeah, that's what happened. Great. Thank you very much, Adele. I really appreciate it. I think at this point, we're going to have to pretty much, I mean, if you want to ask Odette 1 or 2 things to clarify any of the information. I'm not going to get to everybody on this topic, but I will get to the one guy who is still dutifully got his hand up. But, okay, so no further question here. Arnold Gore, and that will be the one we'll take. Arnold,
30,000, that's
question. Now we're gonna just turn to getting a schematic resolution going. Arnold, are you with us?
Arnold Gore, I sent you a request on mute.
Okay, so it sounds like Arnold may not be available. So, let us turn quickly. I'm just going to give a first of all, big thank you to Robert. Really, you really, I don't think you were overtime major. Tremendously helpful and patient, as I noted before. So let us turn to the resolutions. We will have two resolutions on this topic of 5G. One will be on the specific sites in terms of some of the aspects that we talked about tonight that we'll look at the Landmarks Preservation Committee with Jason at the helm, on the 23rd. So specifics about historic preservation, things that Tricia was bringing up, other aspects of the specific sites, I think we'll save for that document. And this resolution, I think, will look at these sort of overarching ideas that we've talked about in terms of the environmental concerns that we've addressed, the privacy concerns that came up, the concerns of need. I would recommend that perhaps we identify everything in the where out clauses, so we have a record of all the public concerns that were voiced tonight. And then I can only offer up in terms of like, the what do we do next? Every elected, and I think I sent you most of the letters or links to the letters of every elected pretty much in the city has opined on this. And there was a couple of very thoughtful letters. One was from our own Manhattan Borough president, who had called for a moratorium until a lot of this information was provided to us. And I had circulated that. I think there's a copy on the desk. The other one that I thought was very good was from State Assembly member Alex Boris. And they both, a lot of people seem to recommend the same thing. A lot of people talk about a moratorium until we have the information on all of the different aspects that we've just talked about, including pictures that we can read and understand what this is going to look like. But Boris talks about, this packet on recommendations, and his belief is to optimize the installation on existing infrastructure. We've heard a lot about that tonight. And I think we all would love to see it, and including our Manhattan Borough president, a way where we're not adding another piece of equipment and putting it on the city's public sidewalk in light of the fact that we already, of course, are so compromised in that regard. And I do think that's something that is worth considering. I would offer it up as a potential, therefore, be it resolved, if anyone wants to agree or disagree.
What's that, be it resolved?
That a recommendation to review carefully the recommendations as put forth by the Manhattan Borough President's letter. I can read that. Yeah, Richard, if you could do that to me, I'll read that out loud, where he says, describes all the concerns, and he says, in order to assuage these concerns, I'm asking the city to slow the expansion of 5G infrastructure in residential areas and focus on commercial corridors. I'm not sure I agree with that, but he's asking to review the city's overall 5G infrastructure programs and develop a strategy that prioritizes installation at sites using existing public infrastructure such as streetlights, traffic signals, and identify city-owned property, including bus stops, that can be modified or reinforced to become eligible for 5G siting. That is something that both the Manhattan Borough president and one assembly member who's looking at this very carefully has suggested, which is using what you've got and trying to optimize what you have in a strategy that would look at least ways to integrate that, if you're believing at all that there should be 5G. But this seems like, given that it's the borough president, I thought that was, not a bad suggestion. So that's my suggestion. I don't know. And
One complication with that is that commercial areas.
But I said not commercial. I said all areas.
Right.
Yeah, I would not agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would not. I think that, from where I sit, it seems to me we don't have enough information.
Yes.
That's as simple as that.
Particularly on the need.
Right,
Yeah,
and,
I
and
agree.
until we had that information, how could we possibly raise our hands and say yes? And
I have
so,
a question on the
yeah.
need. They were saying that you said it was the telecom said that they weren't able to meet the demand in these two areas. That's what I was trying to. Remember you said like, you came up to that site on Harris, on Northmore, you got Citibank right? Okay, go put it at the Citibank building, right next to their fancy glasses, right? Because I'm assuming that's why they probably want it over there, because Citibank is probably sucking all that energy out. And then over on BMCC, it might be because of the university.
But they're only 2 blocks apart.
And the
I
university
know,
has
that's why I was
Well, I
over
think
there. I was
the
looking for
university and the lack of information, again, we've asked for the data that supports the conclusions that you're drawing, that these specific 7 sites are exactly where it's needed, and there are in fact gaps that are in fact there. And, we are not allowed to know who the carrier is, and we're not allowed to know what data they're using. Well, how can we possibly evaluate that? I mean, and it would be one thing if this were a private entity. This is our public sidewalk. And it is one thing if this were a glamorous, beautiful structure, but by our own public design committee, it's called obscene and aberrant. I've never heard words like this.
You can't even defend it. You just.
Well, I know you
I'm
can't.
giving other people an opportunity to talk. I'm sure you've heard more than enough from me tonight.
But anyway, I just think so I think we're looking for a moratorium, we're looking for, until we have information. So does everyone, let me just finish with that point. Is that something that everyone would agree
Yes.
with? And then identifying all the different concerns that were addressed tonight? I think that would make a resolution. Does that sound good?
I'm gonna stop sharing Mark Levine's letter, which I put out once you started reading, so.
Yeah,
Everyone could see that. My one other thing to add in here
Yep.
is specific to CB one, we were a former manufacturing district, a former commercial district. We are one of the largest growing residential districts, and we actually don't have the same type of considerations, because as you so well laid out, if you are a manufacturing district overlay or underlay, or a commercial district overlay or underlay, you are not considered a residential district. And the problem is that doesn't actually account for, this is the city of Yes, where zoning is old and antiquated and needs to be modernized. This seems to be one of those, let me pinch this in here, because it doesn't take into account the recognition of the conversion to residential. It's either residential or commercial. And if you're both, then there's no acknowledgement of the residential in there.
And that's what I saw walking around through FIDI today, is there's residential, commercial.
Right.
And the residential is on the 2nd and 3rd floor. You can see it.
Yeah.
You can see it.
Well, Bidai was a city. It would be the largest growing city in the United States. It has had 238% growth since September 11th, 238%.
In residential growth.
In
which is-
residential growth.
Which is one of those things that we don't often as a board say, we should be looking at rezoning.
All right, whoa. Before you go to 5, and we have got a resolution which is on the table, which is, I'm adding to Tammy's point, underlining the significance of this is a fundamentally residential community, even if you have a commercial overlay, that it's not commercial. But of course, these towers will go in and these 3-footers will go in. So we got that. Any other point you want to add to the resolution in addition to what we've heard tonight and the idea of a moratorium and the idea of getting all the information that's missing prior to making any, commitment?
A youth committee just beaming in here
Yeah.
about the fact that the FCC has not updated this since 1996. I
Yeah.
think that's a worthwhile thing to.
That'll
look at,
definitely be in it. Yeah.
Because it was really surprising to me how, how much control they have and how little enthusiasm they're showing for safety. I really was shocked by that when I did my research. So
I
that's
found
my-
that ProPublica article, which I'm sure you're well aware of, a little bit sobering for anyone who wants to read it.
That ProPublica is one of the ones I saw, and it's worth a read if everybody hasn't seen it.
cannot call the question as chair of the board, so, but I don't, I think.
I will, thank you, Jeff.
I second.
Bravo, okay.
Aye.
Anybody, want to oppose the resolution as we've stated it? Any abstentions? Okay. It passes. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate you guys coming out, and Odette, thank you very much. Yeah, compromise. And Robert, what can I say? Next time we have a bottle of wine,
Nancy?
I don't know. Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We didn't miss you. Yeah, we very, it's nice, you really allow people to be heard. I appreciate it.
Please don't forget our meeting on the 23rd. We really do want for the sites, the imagery of overlay for exactly where that pole is going to go on photos that you've shown.
I got it.
I really, that would be so
I'll
helpful.
let
to us.
you know. I can't promise you that, but I will get
Oh,
back to
you'll-
you way the other.
This week.
Good night.
Yeah, what's it, this
Good
week?
night.
Monday. That'd be great. Thank you
Good
very much, Robert. Good night.
Thank you.
All right, friends.
Wait.
Yes.
23rd, that's the executive meeting?
No,
Monday.
Monday, I'm on landmarks. It's an unusual date because Jason couldn't do landmarks this week, and so we kind of humbled that we had this conversation.
Landmarks is going to be, really want to know how it visually, and wants to know every angle on all sides.
I think that there may need to be a little bit of work in advance for that, because if they don't provide that, then we're gonna have to.
We don't want to waste our time.
But you have no choice because you're on a clock, like everything else at the city.
Yeah.
We'll have to make the assumption, which is not gonna be pretty, of what that might
Well,
look like.
just so you know, Jason and I talked about, if we had to, maybe the two of us would do something ourselves.
It's only in slides.
Yeah, well, I mean, whatever. But, so, battery parks is,
DMR is off the charts in this room.
yeah, that was.
That's everywhere.
But she said it's off the charts for.
Okay, so, we're still in business here. And I really have to
Please
thank
give
you,
yourself-
just a minute, if I can have quiet. So we're moving on the agenda to the last item. I'm going to be postponing the capital request item until the next meeting. So that leaves us with Battery Park City. I remind everyone in the public that Wednesday of this week will be the Battery Park City Authority's public meeting, which is really where you're going to hear the nuts and bolts. Public hearing, where you're going to hear the nuts and bolts of the draft environmental impact statement. And we will, be following up after that meeting. So the Battery Park City Committee, which Jeff Galloway also is a member of, already reviewed this in terms of construction and mediation and such last week, and I sent around a YouTube for everyone on this committee, and anyone in the public can, of course, hear that and what they spoke about. They didn't write a resolution, understandably, it's a rather large document. So tonight, we will go over points that people would like to talk about, just general points about the draft and things that you'd like to have included as comments on this, as best we can at this late hour. So, Tammy's will pull up the draft, and you can, if you all are following or have comments on particular areas, we can pull it up and read it. And I will take notes and take it away. Anybody in this room of our committee members who have items that they feel need to be reconsidered in the draft for the final environmental impact statement that they want to, that's kind of what our resolution is about, right? It's preparing for the final.
Before we,
Yeah.
when we're talking substance, can we just talk a little bit more about process because of the funny timing of when the comments are due in relation?
Totally. Jeff,
Yeah.
why don't you
Um,
take it away?
So we have George.
George James. Oh my God, I forgot George. Thank you. George is
Oh, very
very to help us.
Hi, George.
Hi, George.
So he's looking at the EIS, and I don't know when, George, you're gonna have
There's,
some
hey, George.
tentative work product for us to work from. Justine and Zach and I and Eric, in the Battery Park City Committee had a conversation earlier this week or last week. That we at least have another committee meeting before the 7th. And although that doesn't stop it from being a joint meeting on the 7th. And I don't know if Zach had a chance to talk with you, Tammy, about how that interacts with the board meeting at the end of this month, but considering how big the thing is, in fact, we've got George working on it and all of us have started to look at it and so forth. It'd be kind of nice to maximize the time available to get our comments in a row by October 7th and not necessarily be artificially constrained by a board meeting.
So here's what I'm gonna say on that, because we did ask officially, and the Battery Park City Authority declined to extend beyond October 7th. They provided a small window of an extension, that's it. So we could submit afterwards, but then you're submitting after all the other agencies and everything else. It's not the proper timeline, so that's uncomfortable. Land use does not have a large agenda. We could run on October 7th an emergency executive meeting that night and vote on a resolution. It would be our second executive meeting of the month of October, but we would run an emergency executive that night, vote and submit on the 7th.
Okay, can we do a little of this logistics offline and kind of get into hearing what George has to say about his time frame and the way he's going to approach it? Maybe that'll be helpful just to have that as part of the exchange. So George James, our planner and consultant on many of our projects, Community Board One, is a wizard, and thanks for joining us, George, and take it away as to.
Oh, sure. Good to see everybody. I'm happy to be here, happy to be working on this. There were two things I wanted to do today. Is number one, I wanted to go through what I heard when we met last week regarding where we're going to focus in our energies on. And then just regarding topically about the timeline, I have a couple of I'm going to follow your lead, but I am going to we are going to try to start getting you materials as soon as possible. I know that there is a meeting on the 19th, I believe, Thursday. Your executive committee, and so we're gonna at least have an outline for what we're gonna have by then, or at least that's the goal. And then we'll start filling it in afterwards. But we have the next few days to spend some real time on this, and we were planning on doing that. And part of the reason I think it's a manageable task is because we have prioritized items based upon our meeting last week. And if it's okay with the chair, I'd like to just go through that prioritized list to make certain that folks are on the same page.
Good, yeah.
Okay. All right. So what we heard was really the most important concern was regarding construction impacts. A lot of concern about the residential buildings that are immediately adjacent, the institutions, the schools, the BMCC, Stuyvesant, the elementary schools. And so to take a real close look at what the construction impacts are and the mitigation to construction impacts. Related to that, of course, is the tree removal. So as a part of as part of the action, they have to remove all the trees, or they're planning to remove all the trees, except, they have this unknown condition for FEMA variances, where sometimes you don't have to remove the trees if you can get a variance, but they're assuming they're going to have to remove all the trees. And so, what are the adverse impacts to removing all the trees? Older trees versus replanting new trees, the size and shade differences with that.
It's just a clarification. It's not all. It is a significant number of trees that would be removed.
420.
420. It's not literally all of them. Although there are certain segments, such as right in front of Gateway, where all of them will be removed during.
Fair enough.
Fair
enough.
Yeah.
I was being imprecise. Sorry.
George,
the point is correct.
let's look
Yeah.
at the broad brush before we drill
Yeah.
down on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You're interested in greenhouse gas impacts of construction and demolition, the heat impact, use of poured cement, especially since it's being used here, but in other resiliency projects are not, because of climate concerns. And so looking at that section, you're interested in the alternative sections, and if there could be alternatives that are meaningful to what it. So in an EIS, you're going to have the proposed action, then the no action. And is there an alternative that's meaningful in between that? Transportation, you're mostly concerned about pedestrian flows in transportation and how pedestrians move. The project plans for narrower paths. Is that going to affect pedestrian flows? What about the pedestrian flows before and after construction? Water sewer infrastructure. There is the pump house, which is being proposed, I guess, close to Stuyvesant. And, what are the construction impacts of that? Above ground presence, are there other elements to that? We have to really get into the project description there to see, this is not something you necessarily think of when you're thinking about this project, but it's an important part of it. You're interested in a review of the flood barrier system, and what does it look like? Can we get better models of what the visual impacts are going to be? If there are visual impacts of this, is it something that can be mitigated some way through design? And then the difference between deployable and swing and pavers, and the actual materials that are being used in the critical parts of this. So there's like a design element that you're concerned about, and if this is going to look as you hope it will. There's a question about the use of public dollars and financial issues, specifically land owned by Hudson River Park Trust is receiving, the improvements will be made on their land. Who's going to provide maintenance for that infrastructure? Is that something that's going to be a responsibility of Battery Park City or Hudson River Park or somebody else? There were some questions about other financing and if bonds are being used. I'm not sure that's going to be disclosed in the EIS, but we're going to take a look. And there were a lot of concerns about the public engagement process. There were some complaints about a lack of engagement and unclear information. I'm not sure how much we can really address this in a comment in an EIS, but we'll have a look to see if there's an opportunity for that. And then finally, in terms of areas of focus is mitigation. How appropriate are the mitigation measures that are being proposed? What else can the community board ask for in as a mitigation measure? And like, for instance, construction activities will be loud and they will be disturbing. And a lot of people in Battery Park City now work from home. Is there a way of having alternative work from home locations during the construction period so people have a quiet place to work? I don't know. This is open-ended because ultimately these are comments on an EIS. We can't, we don't want to ask for things that are not doable. But it is open-ended, and we can be creative regarding the asks. But that's it. That's what I had on the things that we want to focus in on. If there are topic areas or subjects that folks are saying, well, we missed this, let me know, and we'll add it to the list.
Okay, thanks very much, George. Okay, Richard.
Yes, I do think we missed something, George, and that's
Yeah.
the natural resources and the possible impacts on the estuary.
Okay.
And, endangered species in particular. And also hazardous materials. Those are the ones that jumped out to me, particularly during construction. If there's any generation of hazardous materials into the environment.
Well, they say
There is.
there is, but they
About
say.
mitigation and what.
Yeah, but we want to look at the mitigation. Yeah.
When you're asking for priority areas, that's what I'm.
Yeah.
Okay,
This
I
thing
see.
wasn't mentioned.
Yeah, that was good.
Good, that's it, okay, thank you,
That's good. Thank you.
thanks.
Yeah, I was going to add the air quality aspect of the hazardous materials as well. I mean, they will be doing a lot of excavation right next to residential buildings. They do address it in there, but we want you to look at it and see how well they address it. In
Air quality construction impacts, right? All right, because the action won't have air quality impacts. It's during construction.
construction impacts, exactly. And on the public engagement, I think part of the relevance or the aspect of that's relevance to the EIS, I think is once again during construction, the engagement during construction, the notification of people when X, Y, and
Yes.
Z is going to happen and
Yes.
as plans are going to change or whatever. I think that's the sort of the relevant part of that for the EIS.
That's a very good point. Yes. How do they engage with people during construction to mitigate? Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay.
I sort of went through, George, onto a bunch, and I'm gonna throw a few out just because this is for the record and will hopefully be accepted or not into some sort of resolution, just in terms of thinking about what next steps. So under land use, I wasn't convinced about the socioeconomic conditions. They assessed that no business displacement and no residential displacement. I'm not so certain that's actually in fact true with this project. I would mind more information on that. I would challenge that myself. On public health, the project would, the operation of the project would have natural resource impacts. And I would say in heat gain, which is something you noted, we spoke up the other day with the removal of the 420 trees, with the 350 that are being replaced, there's really no clear understanding of how the plans will in fact minimize urban heat island effect, for example. Under the adverse impacts of land use, I say the final FEIS, final environmental impact statement, should provide much more detail on how the plans in fact, as stated, comply with the Battery Park City Sustainability Implementation Plan, particularly with regard to carbon neutrality. I think data should be provided, not just what construction is doing to the carbon footprint, but what about the demolition? And I never understand why that's left out of all of this, demolition. They mention, and I think Jeff was alluding to this, that the public access is being temporarily restricted for 5 years, assuming that the project is done on time, which definitely will affect the physical and visual access. And so more detail on the timing should be provided. Under open space, they say the overall acreage would remain largely unchanged and that the project would not result in physical loss, but does alter usability greatly with the removal of trees, addition of concrete and heat gain. So I would say that to me was not noted, but I do think that that would alter the usability of the space. Under historic and cultural resources, for the archaeological investigation 1B, it's unclear whether or not that's taken place. And if it hasn't, it should be noted and what those findings show. So 1B is, a subsequent analysis that they were required to do in consultation with LPC and SHPO. And, clarity on that, it was unclear to me. Under urban design and visual resources, again, the trees come up in my mind, how long is temporary, what is it, 40 years for the tree to grow, 25 years, what are the parameters here? I challenge the no effect with the deployables. The structures of the connecting systems of the deployables are immense, like the one at the end of West Street in Harrison and Northmore, but are not noticed as obstructions to most of the views of the waterfront. But I say that could be looked at a little bit more clearly, closely rather. we as a board had never, I don't think, had seen the before and after until the DEIS was provided. I just saw those for the first time, actual photo maquettes showing what this looks like in situ, these floodgates. I only have another page. Under natural resources, the floodplains, under floodplains, people have asked in our board many times for how the project will affect the areas to the north of Northmore up to Canal Street, which have the most damages compared to Battery Park City during the, sort of superstorm. And under wetlands, they note that a loss of a half of acre of littoral zone was considered small and not impactful, but did trigger something called the wetland purchase of mitigation bank credits from the Sawmill Creek Wetland Bank on Staten Island. What is that? So, what are we getting? What is that? Is there some benefit? And if we're losing something, I'd like to know what we're getting with these credits. I don't, so anyway, that's one. Under terrestrial resources, just got weird. Like they mentioned the strategy of flushing trees and other planted areas with fresh water after saltwater inundation as a way to sort of mitigate things when things may go awry in the future. But yeah, we were told that that actually wasn't possible. Exactly. So it's in contradiction to what this board has heard before. I think Richard went over wildlife, neighborhood character, the increased landscaping they mentioned. How much of it and where? And this will it definitely impacts the defining features of the neighborhood in terms of view corridor and tree coverage. You mentioned greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. I don't understand why demolition is not included in the greenhouse gas emission data. I really would like to understand that. And under the principal conclusions, I think I've already stated something for that, so never mind that. Oh, the material emissions. Oh yeah. Oh no, here's one. This is the other one. Potential measures for reductions of emissions from construction and demolition are under consideration and may include the use of biodiesel. So they say that they are looking at ways to better mitigate the emissions from construction. Well, what's the follow-up on that? I assume that'll be in the final EIS, but what are they doing in terms of recycled steel and construction waste reduction? And lastly, I think it's almost lastly, material emissions. We would need, and I think you noted this, a detailed review of all the materials in the FEIS, particularly with the purpose of noting how, and do any of these materials lessen the heat island or the heat island effect and help with resiliency, all the pavers, the concrete walls, how exactly do these things help? And that, of course, is one of their principles of this whole project, is minimizing the urban heat island effect. That's why I'm bringing it up. And lastly, we need in the final scope to include a need to minimize any potential effect the project has on neighboring areas, particularly those that were most vulnerable during Sandy in Tribeca, Canal Street, and the West Side. Assurance that there would be no more harmful effects on areas north of Northport. We never talk about how this project is affecting anything else around it. I think that should be included in the FEIS. I am done. Thank you for the record. Okay. Who wants their hand up?
Michelle Ashkin, Justine Kucha.
Justine.
Alice, before we move on, if you
Yes.
have that written down, I took notes, but if you have it written down, I would love a copy of it.
I do, and you will
Thank you.
have one.
Thanks so much. If I could, thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks, George, for that. I think you did a great summary of stuff about the construction work. I just want to reiterate what Jeff said about the air quality during construction. And in the draft EIS, they do talk about and mention 2.5 PMs versus 10 PMs. If there's any way to get them to commit to trying to reach and maintain 2.5 PMs as the threshold of what's out there, that would be great if that's a possibility. And then what happens whether it's 2.5 or 10, what happens when if it goes over it? What do? They have to stop work?
That's a very good question.
So, I mean, let's like, it would be interesting to see what the, have that noted to see what's the deal? What do they do?
Like what is the mitigation? If you exceed that, they're going to do air quality monitoring, and what happens when they exceed the thresholds?
If in fact it does, whatever the threshold may be. And then,
And do they warn us?
Sarah?
And do they warn us? Do they warn?
Well,
the
yeah, well,
public?
yes, I was going to get to that too, to say, part of it is, a lot of times, and I think I noticed it in the draft DEIS, that they were talking about giving monthly reports. And can we ask for, I'd love daily, but at least the monitoring to be daily.
So the monitoring and other projects, I know that they sometimes put the monitoring on a website, and it has real-time updates.
That's
And
wonderful.
so you could just, I mean, I don't know if they're planning that, but we could ask for it for sure.
I think we could ask for that. That would be lovely.
Just an update because we have our experiences between 250 Water and the borough-based jail site.
Yeah.
We would need to put it specifically in here, a call for an independent monitor, which should be done. And B, that has to actually be in our feedback because the BBJ does not provide live in-time data. Theirs is 30 days old. So by the time,
Ridiculous.
yeah, theirs is 30 days old because they are scrubbing or finding the information as to why something happened. So it needs to go in especially for this because when we're talking about this, we have now learned negative lessons from the other two locations. And this is underneath windows of where people live, much like the BBJ. So we've now learned that this isn't working. We prefer the system that we had with 250 Water, which was live monitor, an emergency phone number, and an independent monitor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, that would be really important. And so it was the particles, and then with the notice and warning beforehand, something that came up just recently with the borough-based jails, but also in Battery Park City with the South Resiliency Project that they're doing on Rector Place. Giving people notice when it's going to be loud and for how long they anticipate that's going to happen. And having a mitigation plan during the day of it. So when you're doing jackhammering and you've got to go through whatever you have to go through, layers of concrete, it's going to be loud, it's going to be sustained, it's going to be for a long time. Can there be built into the structure, a half-hour break every 2 hours, or what's reasonable? I mean, I'm throwing that out. I don't even know if that's reasonable, but I would look to you, George, for guidance on that as to how to mitigate and ask them to just balance it out a little bit to give people a break.
Yeah. Okay.
But thank you so much for everything you've done. I appreciate it. And what a great job this whole meeting has been, Alice. This has been so informative. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Michelle.
Wendy Chapman. Hi, Wendy. How are you doing?
Hi, everyone. I'm hanging in. Thank you. And the meeting was great, by the way, so much information. To Justine's point about notification, I think notification, and I'm not sure if this is, an ask, because it's certainly not required, but before we have children and, health compromised people signing new leases, I think that there should be a notification of all the building and the leases to make sure that if somebody has a health condition or young children or elderly or whatever we want to say, before they sign a new lease, that they're aware of the lease. I think it should be for everyone, but we probably need to put it in an environmental warning framework, if that makes sense. And the other thing is, as you all know, I'm always up for signs and posting signs, physical signs in the neighborhood. So I think that we need to make sure that there's a lot of advanced notice about in the neighborhood and what the environmental impacts will be in the neighborhood.
When you say physical signs, are you like talking about like a bulletin board where as a way, another way of
Poster,
putting out information, or what do you mean?
it could be a poster, it could be a banner, it could be, a
Okay.
little sign, but this has been consistently the amount of what is put out there is always, and I've said this publicly, kind of hiding the ball. So we all got a postcard in the mail, all of us that live in the region. The print is very small. So I just think that the last in the South, they put the equivalent of what a yard sign would be for a political campaign, that size. They put them around the neighborhood, but at least they put something up. But when you walk around the neighborhood, which I don't do a lot of anymore, but when you walk around the neighborhood and talk to people and say, do you know what's coming? The vast majority of people don't know what's coming. And I really want a Charlie Brown lemonade stand out there, educate people about coming, but
Yeah.
that's.
Okay.
Wendy, anything else? Because we have other hands up.
Please go ahead. Thank you so much. You guys are great.
Okay, Michelle Ashfield.
Oh, sorry, Michelle. Apologies. Let me just move me on over here. Okay, Michelle, you can unmute yourself.
Hi.
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 Hi. Oh, should I make myself visible? Start video?
Whatever you would like, but just make your comments.
Hello.
Benign.
I don't think I look so great, but hi, everybody. Hi. All right, so, I'm recovering from surgery. I actually had cancer, so I'm recovering from that. Yeah, no, I'm okay. I had spoken to Justine about it, and I expressed to her some of my concerns and about all of this stuff. So actually listening to this, it's really been a fantastic meeting, but I have to say I'm supposed to keep my stress level down. And I'm really stressed out after hearing all of this stuff. So I just want to make a statement. I'm just going to read it, add it to the record, because I've already added all of my input about the project, and I swear I don't know why it's going forward at all. I just don't understand why the project is going forward. There are so many reasons it shouldn't. So many. But I'm just going to leave with this one statement. I'd like it added to the record, okay? So I actually wrote this, so that says I am, and there are a couple of typos on here, which you will see if you read it, so please excuse those. I'm writing to the community board to request a reevaluation of the nature impact that the Resilient Project, as it stands now, will have on the lives and the health of residents. Last week, the jackhammers on Rector Place, working on the interior drainage project, were so disruptive, so loud, and so intrusive that I was unable to drown out the noise enough to sleep or work. It was so stressful as to be unbearable. As I am recuperating from major surgery and have been unable to leave my apartment, there was nowhere for me to go to escape the relentless and ear-splitting noise. This lasted for 3 days straight and continued today, Monday, for a while in the morning. While I recognize that this particular episode was relatively short-lived, I cannot imagine how we, as residents, are going to live with the ongoing intrusion of this project when it begins in earnest. Myself and others have brought this issue up with BPCA at several meetings. We have voiced great concern about the health and quality of life impacts of the noise and the air quality, and have been assured that there would be some noise reducing effects. There will be no noise reducing efforts that can mitigate what I heard this past week. I live in 300 Rector Place on the 3rd floor, and I might as well have been sitting in the middle of the construction site. This is untenable and unacceptable. We need to know specifically what the authority is going to do to protect us from these impacts before we continue with the rest of the resiliency project. We cannot be expected to sit quietly and accept promises that something will be done. My health and quality of life is at stake here, as are the lives of all of us who will be exposed to the barrage of construction we will be forced to endure for years to come. I ask you again to reevaluate the impact on our health, the health of babies, elderly, children, and everyone else, and to come back with a satisfactory plan to mitigate these very real concerns. Thank you, Michelle Ashkin. Please add that to the record.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for sharing. That's a very sad state of affairs, and I hope you feel better. Thank you very much for sharing that. I hope you'll be sending that to Board One, so we have it.
We
Okay.
have it.
Oh, I don't have it, so somebody will forward that to me.
Yep.
Do you want me to change to send it again without the typos? There were a couple of typos in there.
I sent it in.
Yes,
Alice,
sir.
you're copied.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Michelle, I got it. If you choose to resend it without the typos, as you've read it this evening, we're happy to have it. Go ahead.
All right, we'll just leave it as such, and just my apologies for that.
Okay, thanks for coming.
Who's the person that is in the center with the hand up? I can't, there's not.
That's
Oh, Wendy. I thought Brittany had her hand up.
Brittany does have her hand up.
Okay, hi Brittany, are you still have a question or no? Okay, she's down.
No, I do. Sorry.
Oh,
I'm
hi,
here.
Brittany.
Can you hear me? Hi, guys.
Yes.
Thank you for all your diligence on this, to the community board, for following along. Alice, to your detailed assessment. Really appreciate all the work that you guys are putting in on this. I would like to echo a lot of the comments that you made, Alice, and highlight a few points. Number one, in signage, I would like a sign on every tree saying this tree will be removed. I think that is very important of the hundreds of trees that are coming down. Number two, I still do not, and even reading the DIS, have an understanding of why the wall is sufficient for between Warren and Chambers, but not sufficient from Warren South, the existing wall, why you can't just build a little bit more on it and raise the height. I've asked that over and over, including on walks, and have had no answer to that, even from the engineers. Number three, lots of feedback about exploring more nature-based solutions, specifically in the north, just like that they did in South Cove, and have they given real meaningful consideration to more nature-based solutions that might lower the DFE required and some of the destruction that's happening on that reach too. I forget which number point I'm on at this point, but I would like to reiterate the point on GHG emissions and carbon neutrality. Construction is one of the biggest leading causes of emissions. It's not just running, diesel and generators and using, biofuels, but there is detailed carbon accounting protocols out there. I would like to see an audited version of their carbon footprint model that goes along with this, of how that this ties in and the carbon impacts of this project. It's, related to the cars, the construction equipment that they would bring, but also the waste that would be generated. All those things have a conversion into a carbon footprint. And I think it's important for it to be audited by someone as well. So with that, I think, the impact on nature and open space, I would like to see a lot more information on that. It's concerning that it is hundreds of trees coming down, given all the constant feedback on the trees. But thank you. Thanks for hosting this meeting, and thanks for all your continued diligence on this. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Brittany. I hope you'll be going to tomorrow's meeting, Wednesday's meeting at the high school.
I wish. I can't, unfortunately, because I have a event for my kids, unfortunately. So.
All right, well, anyway, Tammy,
I want to add just a couple of things in as well. One of the biggest issues that we hear about the construction project that we have right now, obviously the neighbors have spoken about the noise. I'm going to talk about construction traffic and our lack of TEAs, traffic enforcement agents, crossing guards or anything. I'd like included to protect the public at this point. Battery Park City Authority needs to have pedestrian managers at every intersection. This project crosses at every intersection, at least where the construction is happening. At the pinch point of Chamber Street, which is integral to Stuyvesant High School, the access way into HRP, having people on both sides of the street where the construction is happening along West Street, and somebody over at 289-89. That's going to be huge. It's a lot of construction in that area. It affects 3 schools, everywhere from K to 12 and college across the street. I think that's going to be massive. And I think that we need to take a conversation and put it in here, because there is placard parking all over the north area on the streets that will be affected from the construction, that the BPCA cannot ignore that fact and must work with the task force at 250 Vesey to get the cars off the street and to find ways to ensure that there is enforcement. They may not be a part of it, but they're adding to the problem of where cars go. So I just think that they need to be a part of a more global solution that could go in here.
great points. Anybody else want to add any points?
Becky wanted to say hello. She's Nick's new person. Becky, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, great. I just wanted to come in here and say hello, and also to the point of as it's been mentioned.
Becky, because we can't see, it'd be helpful to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. I thought I started it. Hang on. Here we go. Can you see me now?
Oh, that's well.
Okay. Hi. Just as you guys have mentioned, we do have the hearing on Wednesday, and I also want to mention I'm someone who mentioned that they would not be able to make it. You can still submit comment through email if it. So the email address for that is NW for Northwest bpcinfo@bpca.ny.gov. So anyone who wants to submit comment that cannot, for any reason, we want your input. So that's one thing I just wanted to hop in and say for sure. And I'm here to listen. I'm taking down everything. I've got my notepad here with 2 pages going so far. But please bring this input for us on Wednesday, and anything else. I'm happy to listen. I don't have a lot of answers for you guys right now, but we'll be working on this for a while. So.
Hi, Becky. It's awfully nice to meet you, and thank you so much for that introduction. Just curious, I went on the site today to try to pull up anything on the meeting, and I couldn't find it anywhere on your site. So I don't know. I often am your site's terrific. No criticism. I don't know why I as Joe Public, who's been on that site a couple of times, couldn't find it. So I don't know.
If you go, when you get to that main grid that gives you the 4, if you go that continues to the website, there's one grid down there now that has the meeting information or the Northwest BPC info. If you click on that, it takes you to the Eventbrite page, which has all the information for the public hearing.
Okay, it did earlier today, so I'm glad that.
Yeah, it's up now. I just looked at it a minute ago, so it should be. If not, let me know. If it's not working, we'll.
I'm delighted it's there. That's one thing. And then just to be clear, this meeting is, I think it states on that card or that whatever the statement there is, that you cannot have. There's no question and answer as part of this hearing, right? There's no.
That is correct. We are just taking public comment on Wednesday.
Well, how are you taking it? Just through?
There will be a presentation, and then followed after the presentation, members of the public will be able to voice concerns. And I'm not sure exactly if it's going to be. It will be a public forum though, but I'm not sure if we're doing microphones or what exactly. But I think it's that.
It will be. Okay. Well, then.
And next, it also indicates it's by Zoom. Can you make your comments by Zoom as well?
Yes, you can. I forgot to mention that part. Thank you.
That would be great. And Becky, would you put your email, if you're willing, in the chat so maybe Tammy can share it? So this way
Absolutely.
folks know. Thank you. Sorry, Nick shares all his stuff, so.
Oh yeah, no, I'm the same way.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say one thing, Becky, when you talk about the accessibility in that meeting, the last meeting that we had at the auditorium in Stuyvesant, there were microphone issues, back and forth, and also internet issues, which prevented the live stream from actually working very robustly. I'm not sure what needs to be added, but I'm asking that whatever it is, that it is done for this, please.
Is there a time limit?
I did a walkthrough on Friday, and we did check and make sure that the internet was working and everything. So, but I'll make sure that when I talk to the team, we're doing one more run through of the presentation. So I'll definitely flag about the microphones.
Can you just confirm for the public that is there a time limit on the public comment?
Yes.
Does anybody, and what is
Yes,
that?
it's 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. And can, anybody can, in other words, you're just gonna get up to a microphone. It's not like you're taking cards and deciding, okay, great.
Yeah, anyone can come up and speak. Also, anyone online can speak as well. And there will be a queue that will go back and forth between public and Zoom, so it's a fair balance.
If you're just making a comment, but you don't understand something you read, that's not the forum to go. You should call separately to understand.
The question, can you hear her, Becky? The
A little
question
bit.
was, this is not the forum to ask a question. I think.
Yeah.
Not so much. You can put questions into your comments, but we will not be doing a Q&A session at this event.
It won't be answered, in other words. You can put it in your comment, but it won't be answered at all during the course of this meeting.
But answered at some point, what happens with those trees?
Well, what happens to, so let's, Becky, so where do those comments get addressed and those questions answered? Where does the public follow up?
I'm not sure right at this moment, but I know it's something we will be taking all the comments and information and we should be able to move forward.
Really important, so if you could get that to us.
Well, generally, in the final EIS, there is a section that addresses all of the comments and questions.
Well, that's right, and if that's the response, that's the response, but that's worth knowing.
That's where it's going.
All right.
That's my understanding, similar to Jeff's words.
All right, if you could confirm that understanding is stated, Becky, thanks. I thought you were just introducing yourself. We're putting you to work.
No, it's okay. I love it.
Diane Stein, hi, question. We're gonna wrap this up by 9:30. Go ahead.
Hi. I also can't make the meeting on Wednesday. I have another community board meeting that night. But is there say two questions. Will there be a way on your website to look at the presentation or hear the presentation after the meeting? And also, when is the deadline to submit comments? Can it be submitted afterwards?
That's a great question about about being able to access it afterwards. I will find that out, and if we're able to, if it's not on the website, I can find out a way to share it here with the community board. And the question period deadline or comment period rather is October 7th. So just send your comments to nwbpcinfo@bpca.ny.gov, or you can also send things directly to me, and I'll make sure that they get put over there as well. And my email is in the chat. So it's just my first and last name, Becky.Beaver, that is my name, at bpca.ny.gov.
Michelle, I think you're last up. Go ahead. Michelle Ashton.
Michelle, did you have a follow-up?
Hi, I'm here. Yeah. Quickly, I'm trying to find the, I'd like to read the DEIS. Where is it? I can't seem to find it.
We do have the DEIS publicly published on the website, but I'm not sure exactly where without looking.
On the website, and I've been going through it and I don't see any links.
It's on the, you go into Northwest Battery Park City, and when you get in there, you look for other information and then pull up environmental reports and it'll come up. It's
also what the public hearing is. When you click on that, there's a link to the DEIS there as well.
Okay, I'll look for it. All right.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you, everybody. So I think we're at a point where we could put a skeleton of a resolution that I think will be fleshed out after the meeting. As I recall, to me, what would make sense is to memorialize again through a resolution what's been stated tonight about things that we'd like to have followed up with in the final EIS, and noting what we've heard. We can, I don't know, can we use it as a skeleton and then go forward as environmental protection, or at the next upcoming Battery Park City to put together whatever we're gonna learn at the public hearing, or what do you
George
think?
was gonna have something for us at the executive
So,
committee. Maybe that's the skeleton.
okay, so that could be the skeleton. I'm happy that happens. George, is that good? Is that?
That's the plan. That's the plan. We got a lot of work to do between now and then, but that's the idea.
The plan is then for us to craft it at the executive, or to, I guess we kind of have to because we need to make a vote up to the 24th, right?
Correct, so notes from Battery Park City meeting, notes from this meeting. George will help summarize all of it to be able to do a resolution, and feedback from the public hearing ideally on the 18th. And then we'll be doing a resolution in exec.
And this resolution could simply be, not simply, but to identify the comments, not necessarily in whereas therefore be it resolved. I mean, what we're basically offering are all the comments, things we want to see at the FEIF. I mean, I think it could be structured any way George is comfortable doing it, right?
Well, and we still have time. I mean, I think part of the resolution may be to authorize this special executive committee on the 7th to come up with our final comments to be submitted on the 7th. Tammy, didn't you indicate we were gonna have a?
We can absolutely do that. That's our back end if
I mean,
we're
it depends
not.
on how far we get this covered.
Exactly. If we manage to get it done in time for full board this month, then we're
Then we're
in
done.
great shape. If we cannot, then that's a backup plan, because with something this monumental, it literally changes the entire west side of the Battery Park City Authority landscape and up into Tribeca. If we don't, we just need to do the best we can and the best everything.
All right. Here,
Makes sense.
on that note, the best we can get out here at 9:30. I cannot thank everybody who showed up for this incredibly long, but quite interesting evening of information. And just a reminder to please go on Wednesday to Stuyvesant High School, 5:30 to 8. I think the real kickoff is at 6 for this public hearing. And also a reminder that next week is Climate Week, so there are many, many really interesting things going on in New York City. And with that, I say good night and a million thanks to
Good night.
everyone, and particularly to George, who hung in so long.
Thank you,
And,
George.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for a great meeting. Good night.